Okay, I don't know, but I've been told when the Saints come marching in, we roll so deep that they can't believe we sold out seats to them CDs. Please don't sleep on the beat. I beat up these, still don't get it, what you keep up, please. We ain't no heroes for sale. If you bought one, better keep your receipts. Okay, I get it. I know what they thinking. We some kumbaya singing, corny Christians. Keep your disses, buy a ticket to a concert, pay a visit. Think it's odd? We them blues brothers, 116 on a mission from God. I don't think they get it. I really think what they gotta do is see it to believe it. I wasn't planning on leaving them. Give me the microphone with no gimmicks. I really live it. So then they come in, don't get known, but I don't get them. And if you ever wanna get it, we'll tell them to come and get it. I want them to, I got it, and tell them we really with them. They're thinking that I'm tripping cause I'm living for more than just rapping. What is what happens when the Saints go marching in?
When the Saints go marching in. When the Saints go marching in. Saints go marching in. Saints go marching in. Saints go marching in. Marching, my homies they be marching. Can't tell the second letter. Oh no, pretty go-go. Them boys sold out, no promo. Said they give it 2 years, it'll go cold. But they words got 8 like Ocho. I'ma give it 300. In the street, probably wanna see us go on. But we in it, we live it, we get it. Our God gon' do what they want on. We fragrant, the aroma is that our God saved. Married to the rock and I'm faithful to take these words Beyonce. Don't it feel like we famous? But the world don't know what our name is, but heaven knows us, baby. The last book of life is that A-list, so I bow. I'm so rich and I ain't talking about cheddar, but I make cold Christ go and talk to the teller. Kind of checks that I get, I be cashing forever. Laugh at the same time, can the thing go? They be lacking to pay that. Like a straight man, we ain't lacking the thing. Brag with the fake pay, by the blood of the lamb. That is paid, that is paid.
Rich towards God.
Oh, when the Saints go marching in.
Go marching in.
When the Saints go marching in.
Go marching in.
When the Saints go
marching in.
Saints go
marching in.
Saints go
marching in.
Saints go
marching in. Okay. Left, right, hold up. Left, right, whistle. Hold up. You said they'll know us by love. Look. Now I don't know what you've been told about us, but we gon' love them even though they doubt us. We just visiting like we some out of towners. Got them asking us how does this guy turn y'all into shouters? Like hold up, we don't better think we better. Cow is perfect, no liver, but we glad to be cow saints cause Pop Cow is sad in them letters. We set apart for the Savior, he's led our hearts to the maker. Forget the art that we making if we never love our neighbors. You might catch us whistling, march to the spot straight glistening. Shining cause we feel with them, you might wanna listen in. Messiah came down and he rained and he rose. Here they go with this again. That's what makes us love our neighbors. We knockin' so better
when the Saints go marching in. When the Saints go marching in. When the Saints go marching in. Saints go marching in. Saints go marching in. Saints go marching in.
Let's go. Don't waste your life, man. I know a lot of people that are scared they gon' die. Couple of them thinking they'll be living in the sky. While I'm here living, man, I gotta ask why. What am I here for? I gotta figure out. Waste my life, no, I gotta make it count. If Christ is real, then what am I gonna do about everything in Luke 12:15? Out of 21, you really gotta go and check it out. Paul said, if Christ ain't resurrected, we wasted our lives. But that implies that our life's built around Jesus being alive. Every day I live, I'm trying to show the world why Christ is more than everything you'll ever try. Better than pretty women sitting and living to get a minute of any women, a minute you admire. It ain't no lie, we created for him. Out of the dust, he made us for him. Alexa said he saves us for him. Jesus comes and he breaks us for him. Magnify the Father, why bother with something lesser? He made us so we could bless him. To the world we can bless him, resurrect him. So I know I got life. Matter of fact, better man, I know I got Christ. You don't see his ways in my days and my nights. You can hit my brakes, you can stop my life. Man, I lost my rights, lost my my life. Forget the money, cause it's all-
Good afternoon and welcome to the inaugural Young Influencer Summit. My name is Kristen Mosley and today I will be your MC. We hope that you enjoyed the voter education segment. I am so glad that you all have joined today. Be sure to go ahead and share this summit with your friends to make sure they're tuned in too. With all that's going on, it starts with the discussion. So for you all to be here to join in on the discussion is a great start to making change. Today's sessions are social justice, peaceful protests, COVID-19, and mental health. After each session, there will be a Q&A, so if you think of anything, be sure to enter a question into the Q&A box. Please note if your question is for a specific panelist. Be advised, the Young Influencer Summit is being recorded, and all comments entered in the chat box are public. With that being said, let us agree to a few essentials. First, assume goodwill. Apply the golden rule, so do unto others as you would have do unto you. Choose kindness. And finally, your comments are public, so post as if your mother could read them. With that being said, our first moderator is Izzy Johnson. Izzy is a student at Georgia Tech majoring in political science and Spanish. Izzy is one of the co-founders for Buckhead for Black Lives organization. She will lead the discussion with her cohorts on social justice. What are some of the social injustices and how, as youth and young influencers, we can be a part of the solution for overcoming? But before we get started, we do have a message from an American actress, singer, songwriter, Dawn Jewel Lewis. She is best known for her role as Jaleesa Vincent Taylor on the NBC television sitcom A Different World. In addition to being on the show, Dawn Lewis co-wrote the theme song. Other notable roles include portraying Robin Dumars in Hanging with Mr. Cooper and as Cheryl Spade in I'm Gonna Get You Sucker. In 2016, Lewis was cast as Disney Junior's animated series Doc McStuffins as the voice of Grandma McStuffins. In 2017, Dawn Lewis provided the voice of Maybelle Mundy in the film Bunyan and Babe. In 2019, Lewis portrayed Zelma, Tina Turner's mother, in Tina on Broadway. So let's hear a message from Dawn Lewis.
Hi, I'm Dawn Lewis, and I'm sending greetings to each and every one of you at the Ben Hill United Methodist Church and your pastor, the Reverend Dr. Byron Thomas. Now, I'm sorry I can't be there with you to join in one of your panels this afternoon at the conference, but if it's okay, I'd like to share just a few words of encouragement with you. First of all, you're already doing the right thing by participating in this conference, getting information on how you can stay aware of what is going on in this country and be empowered as to how, yes, you can make a difference. It takes each and every one of us. There is no one person that is not important. There is no one question that shouldn't be asked and answered. We need to require answers of our leadership and of ourselves. So what am I talking about? You got it. I'm talking about voting. These are very, very different times right now. But the truth is, the things that have been happening in this country and around the world have been happening for generations. So what do you say? What do you say we come together and put an end to racial injustice, put an end to economic disparity, put an end to political paralyzation with our generation? So if you're old enough, I need you to get out there and vote. The country needs you to get out there and vote. We need your support. It makes a difference. So don't think, well, why my one vote is not going to matter. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So if you are old enough, that's what we're looking forward to. We are counting on you. It takes each and every one of us, and we can't be the weak link. You know what I'm saying? Okay, I know you know what I'm saying. So please, please, please stay healthy, stay safe, stay responsible in this COVID climate, as well as the racial realities that are happening in the world. It's not just here in America, it's on each and every continent on this planet. The world is saying enough, enough, and your voice matters. So, as the conference title says, stay woke, stay vocal, and go vote.
All right, Izzy, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, hi guys. Welcome to our social justice panel. My name is Isabel Johnson, and I am a co-founder of Buckhead for Black Lives, a social justice organization, and I will be serving as your moderator today. Please welcome Madison Crenshaw and KJ Wallace. They are also two other founders of Buckhead for Black Lives. And Madison is a rising sophomore at Belmont University, where she studies political science and Spanish. And KJ Wallace is currently a rising sophomore at Notre Dame, where he's majoring in political science and Chinese. He's also on the football team there. The three of us will be speaking on social justice. Hey, Madison and KJ, our group Bucket for Black Lives was definitely a group effort. A question I always get asked is, how did our group even come about?
First, let me start by saying hi, Izzy, and I want to thank everyone for just inviting us to speak here today. And yes, that is a question that we do get a lot, and it really all started when one of our close friends that we all are friends with, Nick Jackson, started a group chat, and he just put in a lot of fellow students, ranging from alumni from our school and kids that were still in school, just to honestly come together, talk about everything that's going on. So we felt like we had a sense of community, and after we texted for a bit, we all kind of came to the conclusion that we wanted to do something for our community because we felt like our community wasn't really speaking up. They weren't using their voices for what was right. So we decided, hey, let's try to put on a protest. Let's try to, make our voices heard. And I honestly think it's been the highlight of my summer to do that. But I'm so thankful that we came together, came up with, that idea and were able to execute it, which was really, honestly, so amazing.
And just to go off that, just hey everybody, how y'all doing? And just to go off of that, really, it was just a phone call that kind of sparked the whole thing. Nick called me one night, and it was recent. It was recently after the George Floyd killing, and Ahmaud Arbery and everything that was going on. And Nick called me and was just like, look, like we got to do something for the community. We can't just let these things happen and really just sit back. So really, it was just something that happened over a quick phone call, and then that's what happened.
Yeah, there were so few of us at Lovett that were especially in our grade. So that was the large majority of the people that are in Bucket for Black Lives. Though there are so few of us that we really do just kind of become a community in our own right, because we all have pretty much around the same experiences by being a minority in such a predominantly white institution. Do you guys want to speak on what it was like growing up Black in our community?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we all went to predominantly white institutions, and Izzy, I know both of us have been there since we were in kindergarten. So we've been there since forever, basically, and it's basically all we know. And I definitely think, looking back, I didn't realize at the time how maybe Lovett might have affected me and how I saw myself in my identity. But I know that after leaving, there's so many things now that I can think of, that's completely different. I have a completely way of thinking on that now. But I think the Lovett community, or just any community in general, when you're at a predominantly white institution, you might not feel always as welcome as usual. Not to say that I didn't have a great experience at Lovett, but I'm still considered as the other. And that does have an impact on you after a while. But I would say, at least from my personal experience, I do wish that our school, had a larger population of kids that not were only Black students, but just minorities in general, because as many people know, kids can be very cruel, and middle school just in general is always a horrible time. But to add kind of a racial divide on top of that was a lot for a lot of kids to go through. And I do wish that more resources had been offered to kids starting in middle school, for minority students to, have that outlet of someone that they want to talk to, that agrees and understands, I think. But yes, that's kind of my experience out of it.
For me, my experience is probably a little bit different. I came in 7th grade, and I was coming from public school originally. So for me, the transition was a little bit harder, going to a predominantly white institution, because, the school I came from, it was all walks of life there. But kind of coming in and just kind of seeing the environment I was in, it was a real big switch up. But, eventually I learned to adapt. And really, I feel like going to a predominantly white institution like Lovett, it kind of really allowed me to not necessarily change or adapt my identity, but it kind of made my identity stronger, and it kind of made me realize like this is who I am, and I'm not really going to change for anybody. But with all that being said, I mean, I had a good experience going to Love It. I made a lot of connections, had a lot of good times, and I felt like it definitely impacted me for the better going there. So I would say overall I had a really good experience.
Yeah, that's the thing about Love It. Even though, I mean, everyone can be upset about high school or whatever and complain, it was honestly not that bad of an experience. There were things, of course, there's little microaggressions because I feel like a lot of the Black kids were put in positions where we kind of had to educate our peers on things that like we felt uncomfortable about as Black children. And I think that's what like the whole situation is about. Like we need to just be there to educate everyone else. Like we don't have to educate, but we need to be there to kind of inform people like that what they're doing is wrong. And that's the whole idea about being in social justice. So why did you guys actually decide to join the group Buckhead for Black Lives? Like what was your own personal reason?
I think my personal reason was because I was very disappointed, I think, initially in our school's response, and I was frustrated. And I thought that this was, a perfect opportunity not only to use our voices, but to set an example, because the adults couldn't even bring themselves to, really make a clear stance on some of these issues. So for me personally, I was just thinking, I was like, this is a great way to use my voice and to set an example. I just really think that there's a ton of young Black girls and boys out there that are living in the same community that we do that might not think that they have anybody that they can look up to, not anybody that they can talk to, but to just, put our faces out there and say, hey, we're here to advocate for Black Lives Matter, and, just to help out our community. I think that was a really big factor for me.
For me, I really, I have a younger brother and sister, and they both go to Love It. So I just kind of sat back and thought about it. I'm like, I can't let these kind of things continue in the community that my siblings are in. I can't, when I have the ability to change it, I can't sit back and just let that happen. So for me, that was really the biggest thing. I want to create a better future kind of for my brother and sister and, other younger Black kids in the same community that I grew up in, so they don't have to go through the same things that I went through. So, and as far as like the microaggressions that like Izzy talked about and, things like that, like I don't want my little brother and sister to have to go through things like that. So that was really like my main motivation behind that. And also like, this is kind of like a place I grew up in. So, like I kind of wanted to give back and kind of show like, you can do this. It's not something that, we see change happening. We always think it's got to be something big, but like you can definitely it's something you can start, in your community. Like I said, I'll start over a phone call. So, I mean, something as big as what happened started over a 45-second phone call. Like, I just feel like that right there in itself speaks to the fact that you can do so much with so little. And it's just like, really the whole main thing behind it is just making change. And change can be either small or big, but at least it's change. So that was kind of my whole thing behind it.
Yeah, personally for me, like Madison said, I've been at Love It since kindergarten. So it was just, I wanted to bring it to, and you hear your friends talking kind of about the protests and their parents and their grandparents, and all they're seeing is the narrative that Fox News wants them to see or whatever news station that they're watching wants them to see. So of course they're not going to see the big picture, and they're just going to think that they're going to only think one thing. And that was our big mission too, like bring it to their front door and let them see that our mission is just it's equality, it's equity. We want them to understand that Black lives do matter. It's not just some situation and it's just a trend. Like this is something that is going to be, that's impacting the kids that they know, that the kids that they always have over at their house, sleeping over at their house. It's so, and like by having us do it, it's like they're young people. It's not just someone that is not from the community coming in and say, and like just making this big statement, like it's people that are just so hurt by how they've been treated and want so much for their community that we come in and we're trying to change things up. So KJ, you talked about like what young people can do to take action in their own communities, but like, so what do you think specifically like a young person could do in their own community to take action?
Right now, I feel like the biggest thing is just kind of keeping your foot on the gas. Like, I know a lot of people. You talked about it being a trend, and I think like that's the scary part, because trends ultimately end, and this isn't a trend. This is real life. You see what I'm saying? This is our livelihood. So I feel like, especially right now, is just keeping your foot on the gas. That's with, if you're old enough, going out to vote, getting other people to register to vote. And I know a lot of people like to put down others that like just sit back and post on Instagram all day and, like post the stories. I know we've seen that a lot. And yes, that's not you actually going out and doing anything, but like even stuff like that. I mean, you never know who might see that on your story and who that might affect. And then they go out and they influence some change. So like even things as small as that is something you can especially do. But like, I think the main thing is just finding ways, you can donate, what I'm saying, things like that. But like, I feel like the main thing is just keeping your foot on the gas so that it's not a trend. And so that people up in higher places see that this is something that we're serious about. This is not just a trend, because I feel like right now, people who aren't for the movement are waiting for it to end. And I don't think we can let that happen. So that's just what I think.
Matt, do you have anything to add about what young people can do?
Honestly, I think KJ is spot on.
Yeah.
I agree with everything he said, like absolutely. So yeah, I think he covered just about everything.
And also I think it's like up to young people to hold our friends accountable, because I know personally, and I'm not going to speak for everyone, but I know that I've been in situations where I haven't spoken out, and I know that by doing that, I'm putting myself and everyone else in this position where they're not going to even learn that I'm uncomfortable by it, and I'm uncomfortable in this situation. And so you really need to talk to our, like, your friends. And that's what was so great about the protest, is that it kind of opened up some dialogue in our community to be able to talk about this issue. And because I know that I can say that probably a few of us have friends that just don't grasp it. Like they might believe, like they know Black Lives Matter, but they just don't know exactly like how to phrase what they want to say. So I think that is up to us to just hold them accountable, tell them to come out and support, because it's not something where you can just sit back and not do anything.
Absolutely.
So how do we recognize social injustice in our own schools? Like, is there anything that we could do specifically? Any groups?
Well, I think with recognizing something, you have to, first of all, know what it is. In order to know what it is, you have to be educated on it. So I think that within our school systems, more steps need to be taken with educating the students, obviously, because a lot of people love to claim, okay, well, I didn't know. And it's true. Sometimes a lot of people don't know. But just by educating people and giving them the resources that they need to, be able to speak on a topic and not be able to just say, oh, I don't know, is so helpful, not only to, just the students, but also like the way that can spread. You educate the student educates their families. It's a cycle. So I think that just more steps in schools need to be taken to educate all students on, racial issues, inequality, all of these sort of things, because I know from my high school experience, we did not really dive very deep into it, even like in our American studies classes. Izzy, we were in the same class. you would ask those really hard-hitting questions, and I always admired that about you in that class, because you would press our teacher for more information, you know, looking at different views and perspectives, and a lot of the time it is so one way, narrow path, let's look at it this way. So yeah, I just kind of wish we did have a more groundwork, a better foundation in school, so we can speak about these topics with knowledge and educate our peers, and have them be educated in return. So that would help with recognizing it, I guess, if that answers the question.
A question from one of the attendees. Is this the rally that affected the OK Cafe?
Yes, it is. Actually, that's we had over 3,000 people coming out and supporting us. But of course, there are a few people that didn't come out and support us. And you guys might know about OK Cafe. It's a restaurant in West Paces Shopping Center, which is where we actually began our march to the governor's mansion and back. And this restaurant is really kind of infamous in the community for having a huge Confederate flag right in their dining room since the opening of the store, which was like all the way back in the 1960s. And during the march, they had a banner outside of their store that read, lives that matter are made with purpose. And many community leaders had already been calling for the Confederate flag to be taken down. But I guess because it was during that protest and there were so many people that came out, the Falcons head coach came out, Dikembe Mutombo came out, Frank Ski came out. We had so many community leaders coming out. And they were upset by this obvious sign of like bigotry during this protest that was our march that was completely like not with the Confederate flags and whatever was going on, like the lives that matter are made with purpose. So they had called for the Confederate flag to be taken down. And because this shows that like, even though we're young, I mean, I'm only 19, Madison's only 19, KJ is 19 or 20. And
22 weeks.
Okay, almost 20. And like we are able to make such a big change, which is like, and this has been something that's like, it's been a problem for a while. And we were able to make this change just by putting this on. So there is power in our individual voices, in our young voices. But does anyone else have anything to say about the OK Cafe situation?
I just kind of want to add, going in, yes, with the OK Cafe situation, but that was not the only pushback we received. We had people making fake flyers, which was something that caused us a lot of stress. They had changed the name of our protest from Black in Buckhead to White Guilt in Buckhead. They changed the message, just a lot of things that people were doing to obviously sabotage us, which obviously was upsetting, but I think it hit on a deeper level because people were actually believing it, which is even more like, really, you really think that this is what us young adults are trying to do? Coming from our own community, you know, it was people within our own community that were trying to do this. So I think that was really hurtful. But yeah, just to add on to that, OK Cafe was not alone and, you know, trying to go against what we were going for. But I think the amount of people that came out to support and showed not only OK Cafe, but anyone else that was doubting or wanted us to fail, that showed them that we're here, we're not going to go away, you know, and it's time for a change. Yeah.
Hitting on that, there was a lot of backlash, but there was also a lot of people that I was more surprised that came supported. Like even just going down, we were marching, like there were, you know, people coming out of their house, you know, setting up water, snacks for us. And we thought when we were doing this, we were really going to be on our own the whole time. But there was a lot of help from the community by itself. And I was really surprised. I don't know about you guys, but I was like, taken aback from that because I felt like even yet, like people saying things like white guilt for it, like that right there, it just kind of shows what you might think we were trying to do. And maybe in a sense, it may actually be, you know, something that you may feel from the march going on, but it kind of surprised me that, you know, people from the community were actually helping us out. And I really thought that was big. Like, I think that right there kind of showed me like, we can actually make change. And like, this is something that, you know, people are actually sticking to and are with. So that was kind of something that I was surprised from.
Yeah, and I remember when we were trying to buy snacks, we were just assuming that there was going to be like what, like 500 people showing up, and then it
Budget
was
was
a little like 10 minutes before the protest even started, and we only had like 20 people out there. And we were like, oh my gosh, like no one came out. And then 5 minutes later, the whole parking lot is filled with people. We have to be walking around with our bullhorns trying to get people out of the street. They even ended up, like, restaurants were shutting down early so that they could, because they were like, we're not going to even find parking. There's just people standing here. So, but it was a really great experience to know, like, and just to see that these people, like, our community is with us. It wasn't just a few kids that like might be a little radical and like are standing up to their parents. It's like it was families coming out and supporting, like children walking with their parents, and everyone was wearing masks. Everyone was trying to fit within our norm and like stay on the sidewalks, even though it ended up going in the street because there was so many people. But it was just a great feeling to see people come out. Like, I still have snacks in my kitchen from all the snacks that were left over because people were just bringing in droves of food and passing out waters while we were walking. It was an amazing feeling.
Another question from the floor. How much did social media impact your protests? Did you advertise through social media?
social media was I would say that's probably the biggest thing for us. I mean, like, uh, I don't think it would have been not even a fourth of what it was if it wasn't for social media. I mean, we put our stuff out there. We expected, a few hundred, but it just caught on like that, and people were just reposting it everywhere. People were come here, come that. We such and such from such a radio, whatever radio station wants to do this. Like, it was a lot. Like, it got to a point where sometimes I was like, man, I don't really know. Like we look in the group chat, something new was going on every day. We're like, oh my god, like I don't even know what's happening right now. But I would say social media was huge for us. Like it really pushed the message. It allowed us to put our message out there, and it allowed us to show like the community what we were really trying to do. Because I know a lot of people were well, initially they were saying that it's going to be a protest, and it was going to be like one of the, we were rioting in Buckhead, we were looting, we were doing all this stuff. And we really just wanted to be peaceful. And I think social media really helped us out with that message because we were able to put that out and tell the community really what we were trying to do. So.
And I have another question from the floor. Are you involved with any other peaceful protests in Metro Atlanta?
No, not right now. We had that protest. It's not as easy as we thought it would be. Like, not that we thought it would be easy, but there's a lot more that goes into it, and it's a lot of calls to a lot of people and a lot of connections and fundraising. But we definitely do plan on doing something once we're all going out to college soon, and all around the United States. But we definitely do plan on doing things within the next year.
Mm-hmm.
COVID's also been a big killer with a lot of our plans.
Yeah.
It's hard
We were
to.
planning like a barbecue, but then we were like, there's a pandemic going on.
Yes, and a lot of the venues as well were like, I don't know, COVID and having big groups, and you're like, yeah, that's completely understandable. So I think hopefully, like KJ said, when COVID kind of winds down, we'll be able to do not only like maybe more protest events. I know Izzy was talking about doing voter registration, which is such a great idea, but just really be able to stay active within the community. But we completely understand that safety does come first, and we would also like to follow the CDC guidelines and try not to, violate those.
And I think that was a great question that leads us into our next session of peaceful protest. Izzy, bring to the stage our next person.
Thank you very much, Madison and KJ, for addressing this. Up next, we have a peaceful protest panel moderated by Camille Trotman. Camille is a rising freshman at Georgia Tech. She's majoring in literature, media, and communication with a focus in public relations and social justice. She recently led a youth rally in Smyrna, and on top of that, she owns a small business. I hand it over to you, Camille.
Unmute yourself, Camille, so we can hear your beautiful voice.
Oh, I'm so sorry, you guys, but I was just saying thank you so much, Izzy, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for coming out. I first would like to introduce the two panelists that I'll be moderating, which is Gerald A. Griggs and Palmer William Jr. So first, to get into Gerald Griggs, he is an Atlanta attorney who is a servant of the people fighting for what's right. Attorney Griggs is firmly dedicated to the fundamental principles that we seek truth, mercy, and justice forever. Attorney Griggs seeks to serve the needs of the community one client at a time. Attorney Griggs is a 1996 graduate of Woodward Academy. He furthered his studies at Oxford College of Emory University and Emory University, where he received his BA in 2000. After his time at Emory, Attorney Griggs received the JD in 2004 from the University of Cincinnati College of Law, the fourth oldest law school in the country. Attorney Griggs began practicing law in the state of Georgia after passing the bar examination in the fall of 2004. Attorney Griggs has handled over 1,000 cases over his legal career. Attorney Griggs is a well-represented litigator known for handling high-profile cases. He represented numerous clients involved in the Atlanta Public School cheating trial, Georgia's longest trial. Further, Attorney Griggs has handled countless high-profile cases featured on media outlets such as WSB-TV, ABC, NBC, Fox, CNN, Fox News, CBS, TV One, and WGCL. His most notable case, Jahim Harara, helped launch the national anti-bullying movement and change the anti-bullying law in Georgia. Jahim Harara's case was featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show in the spring of 2009. Since then, Attorney Griggs has traveled all across the country promoting the anti-bullying movement. He was recently featured in speaking at the second annual National Federal Partners in Bullying Summits in Washington, D.C. Attorney Griggs currently tours the Metro Atlanta school system with the Hot 107.9 Bullying is Not Hot tour spreading the anti-bullying message. Attorney Griggs is committed to community service throughout Georgia. He is the second vice president of Atlanta chapter of the NAACP and the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee for the Georgia NAACP. He is also the president-elect of the DeKalb Lawyer Association. Further, Attorney Griggs has worked in partnerships with SCLC, 100 Black Men of Atlanta, Emerging 100, ACLU, the Urban League, Young Professionals, and numerous community groups that are committed to improving the community. Attorney Griggs was honored for his community activism by Congressman John Lewis during the 2016 Congressional Black Caucus Conference in Washington, D.C. And now to give the bio of our next panelist, Palmer Williams Jr., an actor and activist. Palmer Williams Jr. is an accomplished entrepreneur, comedian, director, writer, and actor best known for portraying the character Floyd Jackson on Tyler Perry's TV show House of Pain on TBS Network, and Love Thy Neighbor on Oprah Winfrey Network. He can also be seen and heard on national television and radio commercials. His movie career included Tyler Perry, The Have and the Have-Nots, Medea's Big Happy Family, Laugh to Keep from Crying, and Robert Townsend's play House 22, to name a few. Having recently completed his part in an upcoming film shot in Jackson, Mississippi, he is currently filming his new movie in Atlanta. Palmer has an extensive stage career, performing in several of Tyler Perry's national touring productions, including I Don't Want to Do Wrong, Medea's Big Happy Family, The Marriage Counselor, and Laugh to Keep from Crying. His career as an actor was recognized during his performance in the stage play A Good Man Is Hard to Find. Afterwards, he further showcased his talent by directing and co-writing the stage play, Where Have All the Good Men Gone?, followed by directing, writing, and starring in Can a Woman Make a Man Lose His Mind and What a Man Wants, What a Man Needs. His new stage play will tour nationally starting in the first quarter of 2018. Known to be hilarious, Palmer is highly sought host and master of ceremonies for major events, live performances, charity benefits, telethons, faith-based events, film festivals, and trade shows. In addition, he is the host of the Palmer Williams Jr. Comedy Show, a live touring comedy show featured in a variety of rising and veteran stand-up comedians. His vocal credits include touring as a background singer for R&B sensation Keith Sweat, LSG, and Grammy Award-winning winner Monica. Palmer has also written and released his own album called Neo Saved and is currently in the process of recording his next project. The Palmer Williams Jr. Band routinely tours the country with stops at the House of Blues New Orleans and Riverdale City Center. It features his tribute to Prince. Palmer is married and the proud father of 4 children. He is a native of Camden, Alabama, and is a graduate of Knoxville College with a BS in Health and Hospital Administration. He is an entrepreneur with ownership of several diverse businesses, including landscaping and transportation. And now, after introducing these 2 wonderful men, I have a question for Mr. Palmer first. So with music and the arts having long since been used to voice concerns and to bring the message of our people during times of racial injustice in the past, in what ways can the arts be used to support today's political concerns?
Well, Ms. Trautman, thank you very much for that wonderful intro. That was way too long. And I definitely will have to take down some of the stuff I see on social media about myself, but it's still a blessing to be able to be noted for your work, as well as shout out to Attorney Griggs for the accomplishments that he has acquired over the years as well. Right now, I'm looking for the soundtrack to the movement. In other words, we have a lot of entertainment that's out there. And if I may say, you know, Black people are the most talented people in the world. Melanin is mighty. And what happens is that we are oftentimes exploited for our gifts and our talents, you know, whether we use them for the Lord or for use them for any other medium, but we don't use them in a way that economically gives everyone in our community, as well as the information that's given within the music. We're just entertaining. We're not offering hope. That's one thing that my wife always says, you know, when I'm writing, at least offer some hope, you know, at the end of it all. So in the arts, I'm not seeing a lot of things that involve melanin that are offering a lot of hope. So I challenge those that are writers and those that are performers, singers, actors, producers, directors, write something that is going to change the narrative of how people look at us. You know, we know the definition of entanglement now. You know, we see things like that. We know what it takes in order to do TikTok and how many seconds and how to program that. There are so many different things that we could do ourselves to create a platform that will further push the agenda, if you will, that we really do matter. And that is not a thing about, you know, we're not saying everybody else doesn't matter, but, you know, for the longest, to some people, we haven't. And I think it's unfortunate we have a community of a people that are now waking up in a way that is very, very positive, and yet they want to put a negative spin on it. And I think if the right people of the arts would get with a mentor or get with some of the unsung heroes of the civil rights, you know, movement, of course, you know, with the passing of Congressman John Lewis and the ceremonial passing over the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama today, the irony of it all is that the state troopers were lined up along the highway in order to salute him when they were the same organization that beat him over 50 years ago. So that and the fact that the name of the bridge is still from a very ruthless Grand Master of the Ku Klux Klan that bridge is actually named after. So, you know, there's a lot of different things that we can do, but we have to change the narrative in our music. We're not just step and fetch it, bouncing around and, you know, shucking and jiving, if you will. We need to actually have some message in our music and put it in a way that it will affect the masses and not just one select group.
Thank you so much for that answer. I really just learned a lot just from hearing that. And now I have a question for you, Attorney Griggs, which is the court system in America is highly biased against minorities and people. How do we fix a system that is so broken?
I think it's quite simple how we fix the system. And thank you for having me on the panel. I agree with Palmer. My bio is way too long, so we'll shorten it. And I definitely agree with him that it's incumbent upon us as melanated people to control the narrative, both in entertainment, in music, but also in law. And that's one of the reasons why I became an attorney. You know, I went to Woodward Academy. It was interesting to listen to the young people from Lovett talk about the experience at a predominantly white institution. I had the same experience. So I channeled that energy into going into law because I saw lawyers like Thurgood Marshall, lawyers like Johnny Cochran change the course of history through their knowledge and their legal acumen. So yes, the court system is biased. Yes, it's set up to oppress, and it's time for professionals, African-American attorneys, to step up, both judges and lawyers. And so that's one of the reasons why, you know, for 16 years, I've been a criminal defense attorney and a civil rights attorney, but it's also one of the reasons why I'm an activist. And I love the time frame we're in. And like Palmer just said, one of my mentors will be laid to rest, and one of my other mentors has been laid to rest, and that's Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian and the Honorable Representative John Lewis. And the charge they gave me and my generation is the same charge that we're going to give this next generation. Keep marching, keep getting in good trouble, keep making sure the narrative is clear that Black Lives Matter, and keep holding our elected officials accountable. Because Dr. King said there are 3 ways to make change. Agitation, that's marching and protesting. Legislation, that's changing laws and lobbying. And litigation, that's suing and holding people accountable and locking people up that violate the law. So the short answer to the question is, it's my responsibility to make sure the passion upon which our young people are marching is translated into legislative change that fixes the problem that our ancestors have been complaining about for generations. So I just think that it's time as a professional generation to stand up, stop making excuses, and let's give a better world to our descendants on the same shoulders of our ancestors who passed a better world on to us. It's time for us to pick up the torch and continue the journey to get to justice.
Thank you so much for that answer. And now we're going to go into the Q&A.
I have a question from the floor. This is to Mr. Griggs. Do youth have a role in the NAACP? And if so, how?
Yes, I'm the vice president of the NAACP. I've been the vice president, both the second vice president and the first vice president since 2015. I was the third vice president of the state conference of the NAACP for 2 years. And I've had the pleasure of leading a majority of the protests that you've seen in Atlanta, whether that's the Women's March, which is the biggest protest in Georgia history, 63,000, or the first Black Lives Matter protest, which was 15,000, that was in 2016, or the subsequent Black Lives Matter protest, which was the Friday protest that was organized by students from Morehouse, Spelman, Georgia State, Kennesaw State, Atlanta Metro, that brought 20,000 and has continued for the last 55 days. So as the oldest civil rights organization in the country, we've always been on the forefront of movement, and the Atlanta chapter has been the crown jewel, whether that's James Weldon Johnson, who wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing, whether that's W.E.B. Du Bois, who is one of the preeminent thinkers of the last century, of course, Thurgood Marshall, who is the foremost lawyer of the last century. These are the individuals who helped to facilitate getting us to the point that we are right now. And now the NAACP, particularly the Atlanta chapter, is trying to lead that next generation so we actually get to the promised land that Dr. King talked about. So I am in charge of getting in good trouble. I'm the one who usually leads the marches. I'm the one that leads the protests. And I'm the one that makes sure the young people know what their rights are during protests.
Great. I have another question. Mr. Williams, everybody wants to know, what is it that you tell your children before they walk out of the door every day?
Please be careful. Check in. One of the things that being the father of 2 Black males and being a Black male myself, as you can tell, and also being the father of 2 African-American Black princesses, there's a lot of high anxiety because of the area that I live in Cobb County, which Attorney Griggs probably affectionately knows it as Count on Being Busted as well. But fortunately, we seem to have a decent amount of folks up here, but there's always an import of ignorance that may come around. So just because the rock moves into your neighborhood doesn't mean that the mindset has changed towards Black people. Things that I do tell them, to not get in trouble. Watch your speed. Think about who you hang around. Use discernment about the people in which you associate with. Just get back at a decent hour. Don't violate the law in any way to give an excuse for you to be violated. And I don't want them to live in fear. And I don't want to live in fear, wondering whether or not I'm going to have to leave my home to address a situation, but at the same time, just telling them how it was, even for me coming from Alabama when, protests were so, commonplace, but yet, they ended up being really violent in some cases. I'm a baby of the 60s. When the Edmund Pettus Bridge was first, walked across and it was a failed attempt, my mother was unknowingly pregnant with me. So indirectly, I've been to the march, from then on, and it just seems like, we've been fighting ever since then. So they don't know all that is apparent and obvious to me. And sometimes they have to learn things on their own. And I just prayerfully hope that it's not with, having to be a hard learned experience. I guess I'm choosing my words so wisely, but at the same time, I want my children to understand the plight, but I want them to know that I want them to work smarter instead of harder on trying to make these things happen by having a mentor like Mr. Griggs, and then even you, Ms. Trotman, to have someone that they can listen to outside the home, because as those that are parents out there know that sometimes your children can't hear you. So they have to hear it from another source in order for it to be known as gospel, even though you've been trying to tell them the whole time. And so that's why a lot of parents have that same look on their face when they realize that their kids have just discovered what you've been telling them all along. So I encourage them, I pray for them constantly, and I try not to worry, but we all know better as far as parents are concerned.
Thank you for that. I have another question, Mr. Griggs. After we vote, sign petitions, and spread knowledge, what else can teens do?
Teens can effectively lobby elected officials. They can make sure that they are present at courthouses when the cases that we are protesting about come up for decisions and verdicts. And they can go to city council meetings and hold elected officials accountable. One of the things I think that we've made a mistake in the past is we just told people to go vote. And of course, our voting is the most precious gift that we have from the previous generation, but we didn't hold people accountable. And so it's time for us to hold people accountable to what they campaigned on so that our community can see the change they're asking for. So I think that young people, particularly, especially with the internet, can now start holding elected officials accountable to their platforms. And they can do that in the comments. They can do that with their videos. They can do that in person by asking questions about why we have such drastic wealth inequality, why we don't have affordable housing for communities of color, particularly African Americans. Why do we still have an intransigent police brutality problem? Why is there still need to vote every 2 years to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act? And why has it been gutted? These are things that we need to have that conversation about. That conversation needs to happen digitally because it drives the conversation in big media and it forces our elected officials to act accordingly.
I was wanting to know if I could touch on that also. Just for FYI, when my father had the opportunity to vote in the early part of the 60s, just before I was born, there was a time where there was a poll tax. Just to show you just how important the right to vote is, even after marching and fighting for the right to vote, and just even being more than 3/5 of a man, here it is now, this man had to pay $115 in order to vote. So if you equate what $115 is in this day and time from 1963, imagine if we all had to pay for that. But in a sense, we have been paying for it by the lives that have been lost by the police brutality and the various other ways in which they extinguish our young lives and even our older lives. So instead of standing in line and being wrapped around a building for a chicken sandwich or for the next pair of Jordans, there needs to be somebody out there with voter registration forms and getting people registered to vote, especially those that are now of voting age, like my older son that's 18 now, you know, and then my daughter, you know, a little baby activist herself at 20. You know, these are things that have to be done. We put too much focus on tangible things or things that will lose their value when our value is in our voice and in our vote. So we need to put our values somewhere else than in those tangible things that will eventually expire or lose their wealth or lose their worth. Our vote will never lose its worth. So you got to really, really concentrate on the things that are going to matter, not about your drip, not about what it is that you're looking like when you come out of the house, because you can be a public, you know, success and a personal failure if you don't have the right to vote.
Excellent answers. I have another question. What do you think someone should do if they do get pulled over by the police?
There's several things you can do.
Call Attorney Griggs.
That's one. But first and foremost, make sure you understand what your Fourth Amendment rights are. You have the right to be free from unlawful and unreasonable searches and seizures. So the first thing you do when you're pulled over by law enforcement is that you make sure your hands are visible on the steering wheel at all times, no fervent movement. And when they approach the window, you roll the window down and you give them your driver's license, because under Terry versus Ohio, you have to give them identification. After that, you ask, am I free to go? If they say you're not free to go, then you exercise your Fifth and your Sixth Amendment rights. The one is the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you, and your right to an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, one can be provided for you. The reason why you ask if you're free to go is because at that particular point, that's when those rights attach. Once you're detained, then you have those rights. And again, he's launching an investigation. He or she is launching an investigation. Once you give them your license, you know, anything after that is you incriminating yourself. Now, I would also say, and this is the most important thing I'm going to say, record, because we have to get justice. And like my good friend Chris Stewart has said many times, right now, Black people are getting justice because of video. So make sure you record. And that's pretty much it. I mean, the law is in flux. You know, that's why you have attorneys protesting. That's why you have attorneys that are activists, because the law is in flux. I used to be able to tell you, you do this, you're going to make it home safe. But I can go on a list of names, starting with Philando Castile, that did everything appropriately and did not make it home. So my suggestion is you give him your driver's license, you ask if you're free to go. If he says no, at that point, you have the right to remain silent. Make sure you put the ACLU's number in your phone. They have an app called the Legal Equalizer app, where you can actually press the button and the ACLU will come on the line and they'll speak to the officer for you. Anything past that, I wouldn't suggest doing, because you're either going to, one, incriminate yourself, or two, you're going to end up in a bad situation. Now, if they do ask you out of the car, you do get out of the car, okay? Because that's a nonverbal movement, and you could end up in some serious trouble if you don't get out of the car. But as far as talking with them and having conversation, all that's going to be used against you. So make sure you record, make sure you understand your Fourth Amendment rights, make sure you have a lawyer on speed dial.
Excellent. And I think this next one from the floor, it's for you too, Attorney Griggs.
Yes.
They're asking, why does the Voting Rights Act have to be approved by Congress again? Wasn't that passed in the 60s?
It's the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act. And yes, it has to be passed every 2 years because that's part of the act. It has to be reauthorized. And that's one of the things that people don't really know. And that's one of the reasons why on the floor currently, there is the Reauthorization Act that's going to be named after Representative John Lewis that will end that. And it will also place back into the act the pre-clearance section, which was gutted by Shelby versus Holder, which is a Supreme Court case. So what people need to understand is this: every time we take 2 or 3 steps forward, somebody tries to make us take a step backwards. So we have to stay conscious and stay focused on what the goal is. You know, the civil rights movement never ended. It just shifted. And so what we have to do is make sure we pick up the baton from our ancestor now who's gone on to glory, and make sure we continue to push it forward, because we have to know what our rights really are. And the fact is that it has to be reauthorized. Usually it's a smooth reauthorization, but we need to get it to the point we don't need it reauthorized, and we need substantial protections, because voter suppression is real. As my brother was talking about poll taxes, in Georgia, we have exact match, which is the way that they can cleanse the voting roll if you haven't voted in 2 consecutive federal elections, which removed 1.5 million people from the voting rolls in 2018, another 60,000 right before the gubernatorial race. And then you have polls being closed. You have absentee ballots not being counted. You have all kinds of new systems of voter suppression. So you need to understand that Jim Crow didn't go away. He just grew up and became James S. Crow Esquire. And that's why we need more Thurgood Marshalls. We need more Johnny Cochrans. We need more of the legendary lawyers like Sherilyn Ifill, who runs the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, that we can stay in the battle and stay focused on why we're marching and why we're protesting. We're marching and protesting to dismantle white supremacy, which is just morphing.
Thank you for that answer. And I have another question. Mr. Williams, this one's for you. How can students, with all that's going on right now in the world, how can students peacefully get the word out about their movement?
Well, I think they are already on the right track by using social media. Use the internet for what it was intended to be, which is an information highway. And that's what they have been using it for. And I applaud them for using it, other than, just for 1 minute spans of attention. And I know that I often say that we all are suffering from a little bit of ADD, attention deficit disorder, when everything that we get in information lasts for 30 seconds or for a minute. And we don't really sit down and try to absorb or read as much as we used to. And, even adults are guilty of that as well. And I'm sure Attorney Griggs can attest to the fact that because of his career, it had to do with a lot of reading, because I have a potential lawyer here in my house that's 14 years old. That's his career plan. So we'll be looking for scholarship monies from you, Attorney Griggs. But anyway, the thing that I think that they should also continue to understand is that even with this COVID-19, and it just so happens to be happening during an election year, and with all the different tactics of voter suppression, as Attorney Griggs has addressed, there'll be people that'll be naysayers about whether or not they should go and get out to vote. And that's why these absentee ballots are so important. That's why holding them accountable and making sure that they are counted are so important, because not only that, the social distancing has also thwarted the mindsets of, we are a people that are a caring and definitely a spiritual people. And so when we don't congregate and when we don't touch one another, sometimes we lose that anointing that we all have. And so because of that, and because of the distancing, and because of not going in a holy assembly, if you will, or a spiritual assembly, which is where our, I guess you could say, our community or our central point or central intelligence agency were the barbershops and the churches and places like that, to where we gather our information and we were able to relay it. But because of that, now we have to rely on social media, Zoom, like we're doing today, and other means of the internet. So I would say to utilize your phone other than just for communication and entertainment amongst friends. Use it to create your platform, and everybody can have a platform. If we have like 8,000 different platforms, some of us need to come together even on those platforms and get larger pockets and like-minded people together, as opposed to just being an individual out there that's trying to start a movement on your own when there's so much more power in numbers. So instead of looking for the likes, look for the love of your brother and sister, and look for the love of saving lives, as opposed to just trying to get likes, because they're not necessarily your friends, but they are kin.
Thank you so much for that. That was the last question. Camille, I'm going to put it back in your hands. You are on mute, Camille. We need to hear your beautiful voice.
Yes, well, one moment. I actually have a quick question for you, Mr. Griggs. When did you decide that you wanted to be an activist through law? And like, what made, even though you're already a Black man, which is enough, what really was that turning point, or what invoked that spirit?
It was several things. Like I said, I went to Emory University, and at that time in the 90s, they were still flying the Confederate battle flag as a state flag. So in 1999, I decided with a group of my college students to hold a sit-in. And so we sat in under the flagpole at Emory until they took the flag down. And they took the flag down that day, which was interesting. And it was a win. And so, I was like, oh, well, we can actually affect real change. And so that was kind of the beginning. And then I got to meet, luminaries and giants of the civil rights movement. I got to meet Representative Lewis and Dr. Vivian and Reverend Lowry and so many others, Dr. Bernice King, and got to meet them. And it became real. Like, this is real. You guys are real. And so then I went off to law school to the University of Cincinnati. And my first summer there, they had racial unrest because of police-involved shootings in 2001. And so I was placed on the Cincinnati Can Commission to address this. And my first thought was, well, one, I'm from Georgia, and I don't know much about Cincinnati. Why are you picking me to address this? But, we were on the commission. We helped Cincinnati go through consent decrees and hopefully fix some of those problems. They still have many of those problems, some of them. And that was really the birth, the genesis of activism for me was, Cincinnati, and seeing that you could actually affect change through the legal system, and then, getting to meet other lawyers that do this work. And then coming back to Atlanta, becoming a public defender, seeing the inequities in the criminal justice system firsthand, seeing individuals railroaded, being a part of, Georgia's longest trial, which was a travesty in the teacher's trial. It just forced me. And then Black Lives Matter, seeing Ferguson, seeing what happened to Mike Brown and Eric Garner, seeing what happened to Tamir Rice, seeing what happened to Trayvon, and then seeing what's happened here in Atlanta. It just forced me to become an activist and realize the power that we have inherited from the previous generation. So I just want the young people to realize, in Atlanta, Georgia, you are standing on the shoulders of giants, and many of them are still alive. Many of the foot soldiers of the movement are still alive and well here in Atlanta, and you can go touch them. You can go have a conversation with them, ask them about mass meetings, ask them about what protesting really looks like, ask them how to do a sit-in, ask them how to do a real march, ask them, how do you use messaging to make sure no one co-opts your movement, and these things are real. And then just reading. It's like my brother just said, lawyers, that's all we do is read. So, Dr. King left his blueprint. It's right here. It's Where Do We Go From Here? Community of Chaos. This is his last book, written when he was in Jamaica in In 1967, he lays it all out. Thurgood, Devil in the Grove. He lays out what he did not that far from Sanford, Florida, almost 60 years ago. Sanford, Florida is one of those seminal cities, whether it was Jackie Robinson really breaking the color barrier, or it was Trayvon Martin, or 2 hours up the road, Ahmaud Arbery. So, I mean, the books are out here that can teach you everything that's known about the old movement, and then you can apply it to technology in the new movement and actually effectuate real change. The last thing I'm gonna leave you guys with is this. We have made large strides in this new movement. We've changed at least 5 laws that I can think of. You know, there's a George Floyd bill that's on in Congress that we can get passed to rethink and reimagine policing. Always count your wins. In Ahmaud's case, they're going to take away the Glenn County Police Department. That's going to be on the ballot. So these are things that you need to think about when you're getting involved in this, and make sure that you understand that protesting works. And if you keep your foot on the gas, you keep the pressure on, you not worry about what other people are saying, just make sure you get in that good trouble. And then you will see, just like John Lewis did, a smile on your face when you get those wins and you change the world for the next generation.
I just want to say thank you all. This has been such great conversation, and we truly enjoy you guys taking the time to speak with all of us. And now we will have about a 5-minute break, so you guys can go ahead, get a drink of water, a little snack, and we'll be right back.
I wanna be more low, won't be honest, won't be closer to God. I wanna be more low, won't be honest, won't be closer to God. Yeah, like it gets so lonely and narrow, lonely and hard. Living so low and now you go close your heart. I wanna be more low, won't be honest, won't be closer to God. I wanna be more low, won't be honest, won't be closer to God. Yeah, like it gets so lonely and narrow, lonely and hard. Living so low and now you go close your heart. I wanna be more low, won't be honest, won't be closer to God. Wanna be more low, won't be honest, won't be close to God. Sick of me low, read a thing, WDT will be like, WDT will be like, I just wanna be like you, like you. I'ma show you now I'm in love with you. I've been looking around when it might be me. I'm ready to be like you, be like you. Calling 911, think my light blue. They looking around and it might be me. I just asked to be like you. Ain't no telling now what I might do. Who's that knocking now and it might be me. I just wanna be like you. I've been going down feeling stifled. Who's that on the ground and it might be me. I just wanna be like you. Tears running down and I cry too. Fears for my face when the night for me. Still I wanna be closer to God. I wanna be more low, won't be honest, won't be closer to God. Yeah, like it's so lonely and narrow, lonely and hard. Living in solo and now you go close your heart. I wanna be more low, won't be honest, won't be closer to God. I wanna be more low, won't be honest, won't be closer to God. Yeah, like it's so lonely and narrow, lonely and hard. It's solo and now you go close your heart. Sick of me, look, breathe and think WDT will be like who? WDT will be like who?
Shout out to the father, you with me? Now me and the family winning. One time for the family business. From Taylor Love. Stay with the boss like I'm Diddy. Move like I got key to the city. Yeah. You know I'm coming, we live. I glide, I skate. Come to tell you I'm a Gucci. Origami 16s. Folded like Lucy. Eating good like a foodie. Ready and knocking some Fuji. worry about what they gon' say. That was old, this the new me. You do you enough to do me, alright? I was blue, I switch colors, I'm moving. 2020 God doing the new thing. 2020 mob, we on the new thing. 2020 and they still cannot move me. Winning and we didn't switch up. They said tone it down, we said give up. Big dog status, cliff. Bump your mentions, I ain't here for your competition. What I look like a politician? I've been spazzing, so skip all your politicking. Nah, yeah. Hey, shout out to the father, he with me. Now me and the family winning. One time for the family business. Stay with the boss like I'm Diddy. Move like I got key to the city. You know I'm coming, we lit.
They can keep running, compete with each other. I switch up the pace until I saw little baby run to the Lord. I went to go chase nobody but God and God alone. In charge of my pay stubs. Nobody but God and God alone. Through faith alone, through Jesus alone. Can give me his grace. What's happening? Blood on me, no stacking. Light up the red, I'm stopping in traffic. If you a Christian, I stop you in traffic and scream hallelujah in front of the mass. I'm walking free because of the tree. Oh, say, can you see? All tongues confessing, they been in the need. I'm feeling the need. I'm from the Midwest, but my side is the East. Iron ain't gon' make your pockets increase. They pointing the finger, I just want some peace. Food for thought, I'm giving a feast. They wanted the beauty, I'm bringing the beast. This one in my own, God got me on leash. Forgot I'm a dog, he took off the lead.
Hey, shout out to the father, he with me. Now me and the family winning. One time for the family business. Stay with the boss like I'm Diddy. Move like I got key to the city. You know I'm coming, we lit.
Stop playing with me. No, I would never doubt myself. God told me, yes, I'd never be waste. So I eat rappers for my health. Crushing them, just call me sumo. All this purpose under my belt. Tell them we reaching favor. OMG, that's what I call wealth. I don't need you to tell me I'm fly. I opened my Bible and read it. He said that he's sorry, give us a try. I told him, buddy, forget it, get it. Pray to the Father and get it. Do not wait till it's too late. They see we covered in red. My favorite flavor of Kool-Aid. Me and my sisters, we riding out. Y'all overrated. Waffle House, let them know that we doing it just for the kingdom and do not be doing it for the clout. Stay with the props, skitty. All about grind like nitty.
Welcome back. These have truly been great conversations about finding ways to continue to carry on the torch and to take charge. And there are more to come about COVID-19 and mental health. In a time such as these conversations are so important, with so many students being forced to go online this semester, finding ways to truly keep ourselves safe, both mentally and physically. And so with that being said, Sydney Bellamy, she will serve as the moderator for the COVID-19 panel discussion. She is a rising senior at Westlake High School. Sydney aspires to major in journalism at an HBCU, # class of 2021. So take it over, Sydney.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining back. Good afternoon again, and welcome to the COVID-19 session of the Young Influencers Summit. My name is Sydney Bellamy. As it was already stated, I'm a rising senior at Westlake High School, and I will be serving as your moderator for this session. You'll be hearing a panel discussion from Dr. Colliard. Dr. Colliard currently serves as the president and the CEO of the Atlanta West Primary Care Associates. In the position of medical director, he coordinates primary health care services for men, women, and children. Dr. Collier received his undergraduate education at the Morehouse College in 1979 and his medical degree from the Medical College of Georgia in Augusta. His residency training was at the Morehouse School of Medicine, serving his final years as a chief resident. Dr. Collier became a fellow of the American Academy of Family Physicians in 2002. Dr. Collier serves on many boards, to include the board chairman and immediate past president of the Georgia State Medical Association, the board of directors for the Heritage Fund of Atlanta Medical Association, the chairman of the Community Service Committee of the Atlanta Medical Association, and also the board chairman and president of the Atlanta Medical Association and the Georgia Academy Family Physicians, and the 100 Black Men of Atlanta South Metro Chapter. Dr. Collier serves as the on-air personality and host of the Your Health is Important radio talk show on WYZE 1480 AM. Atlanta's own The Hip Hop Doc can be heard on the syndicated The Ricky Malley's Morning Show, heard locally on Hot 107.9. In 1997, Dr. Collier was appointed as the chief ring physician for boxing in the state of Georgia and continues to serve ringside at all professional boxing events. A native of Atlanta, Dr. Collier is married to Dolores Perez Collier and the father of 5 children, Carla, Millard III, Victoria, Catherine, and Niles. Thank you, Dr. Collier, for being here. Next,
thank you so very much, Cindy. I appreciate that introduction. It was long and arduous, but we are here to talk about the coronavirus and how it is affecting everyone and disproportionately affecting those of us in the African-American community. So we're going to start off with a few key points that I want to make sure that we're making. Okay. So for the younger people, who are doing what young people do, they're going out and doing those things. One, you can't catch the disease, you can't share the disease. There's a case that was highlighted on CNN 2 nights ago of a college student that came home, brought home the infection, infected his parents, his mother, father, and siblings, and and everybody. The siblings didn't have much problem with the disease. The mother got sick but didn't have a bad case. The father's in ICU on a ventilator for 18 days. So it can affect. That is exactly the problem that we are discussing. So how do you protect yourself? How do you protect your family members, yet still, socialize in an appropriate manner? We all are aware of the hand washing techniques that's been recommended. You wash your hands. They say 20 seconds. I say 30. Why not add 10 more seconds? But when washing your hands, most people put soap in their hands. They rub their hands together, and that's it. So you need to make sure that you're washing between your fingers, your fingernails, and the backs of your hands. But also, don't just stop at your wrist. Go all the way up to your forearm and wash all of that. 30 seconds, that gives you your best shot. And soap and water of any type is the best cleaner, bar none. If there's no soap and water available, then a hand sanitizer with at least 70% alcohol content would be good. But soap and water, which is readily available most places, you can wash your hands and be, happy that you are protecting yourself and sanitized, if you will. So the next is social distancing. So we know that the heavy droplets of the coronavirus will travel about 6 feet with a cough. They travel much further with a sneeze, and they can travel in an aerosolized manner and stay in the atmosphere for an extended period of time. So, 6 feet social distancing was recommended for those heavier droplets that will drop down within a 6 feet margin. But we have to really consider that any environment where there are other people, the potential for spread of the virus is there. So you have to protect yourself. So we all talk about masks, and this is a mask. And one of the things that I see when you wear your mask, make sure that it is covering your nose and your mouth. Because I see people, and my mantra for this is don't be nosy. Some masks, as you speak, they will come down, and you will have a mask that looks like this. When you can see your nose, you're not protected, okay? So you need to protect your nose and your mouth, and you need to wear your mask whenever you're in a circumstance where you cannot socially distance. But more importantly, when you're wearing your mask, you're only covering 50% of the problem. You also need to wear goggles, not just glasses. For a lot of people to wear glasses, you need Oakley style or some type of goggle that has a side panel that protects you and stops you and does not allow the virus to come around in your eyes. What a lot of people are not aware of, and what I have talked about, on media for the last 4 months, is that there are receptors on the covering of the eyes called the cornea that are 300% more sensitive to the coronavirus than those in your nose and your mouth or your mucous membranes. So if someone coughs or sneezes in your face and you're wearing your mask, you're still only covering 50% of the problem. And for most of the time, you will cover your mouth just as a reflex, but your eyes are wide open and you're looking at the problem. The virus enters your eyes and you're infected. So make sure that you get, and these are available in a variety of places locally, places like Home Depot, Lowe's, etc. But you can get them anywhere. $2 a pair. $2 a pair with the side bend. So people say, why wear glasses? Your glasses have a large gap on both sides that will not provide you with that protection. And these would probably fit over the vast majority of glasses, unless you have, the $800 pair of designer glasses that you're trying to show off. But cover your mouth, your nose, socially distance, and use, hand sanitizer or wash your hands. That is the basic stuff.
Thank you, Dr. Collier. I'm going to cut you off real quick, and we're going to come right back to you. I'm going to introduce the other 2 panelists.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Catherine Butler. Ms. Catherine Butler is a health scientist at the Center of Disease Control, also known as the CDC. She works on laboratory science and safety. She's an adjunct professor at Mercer University as well. Next, we'll have Miss Lynn Meadows. Ms. Lynn Meadows has over 30 years of nursing and healthcare experience. She received a BSN from Queens College and an MS degree in nursing from Georgia State University. Lynn had an extensive career at Grady Health Systems in Atlanta, Georgia, where she served in several leadership roles, which included the assistant head nurse, director of quality improvement and staff development, and the assistant vice president of nursing from 1996 to 2000. Lynn Meadows is currently the coordinator of student health services for Fulton County School System, where she has served in this role since the program's inception in 2000. Mrs. Meadows was named 2011 School Nurse Administrator of the Year by the Georgia Association of School Nurses and was named the March of Dimes 2017 Nurse Administrator of the Year. She participates and has served on a host of healthcare and community boards, which includes the National Center for Children's Vision and Eye Health, the Ronald McDonald Care Mobile Van Advisory Council, Based Health Alliance Board, Secretary for the Fulton County Board of Health, and she was just recently appointed to serve on the Georgia Department of Education's COVID-19 Mental Health and Wellness Work Group. Additionally, Lynn Meadows currently serves as the state director and state data champion for the National Association of School Nurses and Georgia Association of School Nurses. She is very active in the national and state school nurse organization and serves on several committees and task force. Lynn was selected and participated in the National School-Based Health Alliance Leadership Fellow Program in 2015. She was one of 10 graduates in the first cohort leadership class. Her passions include supporting pediatric health initiatives and elevating the practice of school nursing and school health. So thank you all for being here. We're gonna start with a question. I heard from a reliable source that Dr. Fauci believes that the vaccine is not gonna come until 2021. What does that mean for kids in school? Will we be able to go back to school safe, face-to-face? And this is for anyone to answer.
Okay, I'll be happy to start off. This is Dr. Collier, and then I'll go to some of my colleagues. There is possibility of a vaccine being available as early as September. The problem will be the infrastructure required to get the vaccinations to people. And that's everything from the bottles that the vaccine will go into, the needles required to inject the vaccine, and places you can go to actually have the vaccination. So that infrastructure is not in place and not prepared for mass vaccinations at this time. So we expect that even if a vaccine has been approved and is readily available, it won't be available for the masses until after 2021.
So I'll just add, there we go, is that better?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So I'll just add, first and foremost, thank you all for inviting me to be on the panel. And I think that it goes without saying that we all want kids back in school, and back in school at all levels, whether it's preschool, K through 12, college age kids, we want kids back in school. That's if you think of jobs or in terms of what people do, what kids do or go to school. So we certainly want kids back in school. But to Dr. Collier's point, we want kids back in school in a safe manner. And so many school districts across the country are obviously trying to solve exactly for that. You've heard about probably the various guidance that are out there, the recommendations for schools, and certainly schools across the country are trying to solve for that. Put in place some safety and health measures to make sure that when we bring back, not just students, but you got to think staff have to come back. We have to let parents in our building when they come to visit. So we want to make sure that when we are prepared to do that, to open up face-to-face, whether it's, again, K through 12 or a higher institution, that we do that in the safest way. Now, obviously, as Dr. Collier mentioned, we have a hand in that, meaning our own behaviors certainly impact that. Those three things that he mentioned, wearing our masks, social distancing, and washing our hands, are things that are going to help us to get back to school quicker. But also from a safety standpoint in terms of the school, we need to make sure that we have those measures in place, so then when we bring back kids and we're congregating, we can afford in the system to have that social distancing, to have those cleanly measures that we're wiping and disinfecting between students and things like that. So I think that we all agree that we're ready for kids to come back. We want kids to come back, but it's about getting ready and making sure that we have those safe and healthy measures in place.
Thank you for that. So, Miss Catherine Butler, can you speak to where did COVID-19 originate? Like, how did we get to this point?
Well, I think there's a lot of information out there that's been disseminated regarding where it came from, but we've actually seen cases as far back as, 2019, although it really hit the scene in 2020 in terms of being on the news and people knowing it, we just didn't know what it was. And so if you look at all these different cases that were being cataloged, a lot of people were coming in for respiratory virus symptoms and not really knowing necessarily that it was COVID-19. It wasn't until we started to see a trend of it showing up in other countries, and we have people in different medical communities putting information together, that we begin to realize that it was this new strain of SARS-CoV-2 that we're beginning to see. And so I think it's not a thing where it just popped up overnight. It was just that, as trends go with epidemics, and this is definitely a pandemic at this point, where it's affecting multiple countries, is that we're now starting to see it roll out. But it was around prior to it showing up in America, obviously. But we see with global travel and just how things spread, that it's very quickly that a respiratory virus can show up. We actually had incidents of it even, at CDC in different places where we didn't notice that's what it was. But going back and looking at symptoms of what people had, the shortness of breath, the fatigue, the ability not to be able to be treated with regular purposes for flu or different other respiratory viruses, just not knowing, and putting all those pieces together, we could see that the incidence was there much earlier than, March 2020, when people really begin to hear about it on the news. So it's definitely been something that was around before. And as you know, or people may not know, this belongs to a family of viruses. And so the SARS viruses are a family of viruses that are studied and have been well studied. It's a matter of this being a new strain, emerging strain that we're seeing that's popping up. And that's why we don't have immunity, like Dr. Collier talked about, being able to have a vaccine, because we don't have that strain of immunity yet.
Thank you for that, Ms. Catherine. So, Ms. Lynn, can you tell me, what are some kind words or pieces of advice that you could offer to students that are really bummed out about not being able to return to school face-to-face during this time?
So that's certainly, first and foremost, I'll say that that's certainly a normal feeling. School, again, is like I said from the very beginning, that's what kids do. Kids want to be back in school. And so to feel disappointed, to feel upset, and I know especially for those who, for instance, this was their graduating year, felt disappointed not to have the on-site types of graduations and other celebrations that other kids have had traditionally. So what I would say is just to hang in there, do those things that we know, at least for right now, the science is telling us. And I know that you young people, because I have a 20-year-old and I have a 25-year-old. And if they say, Mom, stop telling us about the 3 W's, wash our hands, wear our mask, and watch, how you socialize in terms of your distance. I know that we keep preaching that, but that is really the best way that we know of, at least right now, based on the science, to get us back to things like school face-to-face and get our gatherings back. Right now, that's what we know. So I would say just be true to your feelings. Obviously, it's okay to be disappointed, but here's the thing. You all live in the best right now. In my day and age, we didn't have internet. We didn't have all these technology devices that you all have now. Utilize them now. You go on Zoom, create some, all of these meeting forums that you all can do from an internet standpoint. Utilize that in the interim. Also, one of the things that we've been just kind of stressing with our kids, this is a prime opportunity to get caught up on some things that you haven't been able to. You're in school, take some extra online classes, take advantage of sharing it, taking advantage of utilizing or this time to even think of something else that you're passionate about and things that you can pursue. I mean, I've taken up baking, Lord have mercy. I've never thought that I would have time, but I have time now. So whatever it is that you have wanted to do for a while, there's been this good book that you wanted to read, these good programs or movies and things that you wanted to do. Instead of thinking it from a negative standpoint, think of it about what can I do in this interim to utilize my time wisely. And some of that means that you can even do things like this. Volunteer, utilize your time to help others when and how you can, safely though. But, you know, again, just thinking about how you can stay engaged. But again, just, if you will, just remember, the quickest way that I think that we can get back to some of our normal things is in the interim, follow what the science is telling us, follow these prevention strategies that work right now. And hang in there. It's coming. It's coming.
Thank you. Thank you for the encouragement. Dr. Collier, the hip hop doc, how to stay safe. Besides what we've been hearing and doing, wearing masks, social distancing, and washing our hands frequently, what are other things that we as young people can really do?
Well, the first thing is, once you have made the decision to leave your home and to leave socially isolation or quarantining, that there is no 100% safe way to socialize. So once you've made that decision, you have decided to put yourself at risk. So putting yourself at risk means minimizing the risk. And that means if you're going to socialize in smaller groups, socialize in a pod of people that you know are disease-free and spend quality time with them. But going out for large group gatherings, you cannot control the environment, even if it's outdoors, as you see a lot of the people that are having group gatherings, beach parties, etc., are having large numbers of infections being passed back and forth. So it's very important where you go, who you go with, and how you conduct yourself once you get there. So you know, wearing a mask to the event, but then taking the mask off, particularly if it includes food and drink, you're going to take your mask off. So you have to be careful about the socially distancing. And so that is key. Remember, nothing has changed about the virus in the 4 months that we have been dealing with this, other than now we're at the worst point that we have been at any point during this pandemic. We have lost all the benefit that we had of the 2 months of quarantine. That's all gone now. And the only thing that's happened is that the time is coming on, and people and individuals have become frustrated with the process. And so people want to go out and do more things. So you have to just kind of quell that desire and realize that you know, better times are coming. But what we do now, 2 weeks of socially quarantining will make a major difference in what we're doing. If we don't, we're going to be dealing with this for another year. And you know, and once the flu season comes, we're going to have to deal with the flu. We're going to have to deal with COVID. We're hoping that the virus does not mutate, so that we're not going to have that problem. So, you know, doing and biting the bullet now for a very short period of time can make a difference in whether schools open, whether they're going to have in-person classrooms, because any school can open. The issue will be keeping it open and keeping not just the students. The students are at minimal risk. It's the staff, the teachers. Most of the teachers are in high-risk categories for either just their age or their disease processes, high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, etc. So they are in those groups that are high risk. The people that work at the school, everybody from the principals, the vice principals, the janitors, the cafeteria workers, they're all at risk. So we have to be very careful and conscientious about what we're doing, where we're going, and if we really want to capture this in a way that we've seen demonstrated quite well in other countries. This became, instead of it being a public health issue in the United States, it became a political one. And as you can see, politics and science don't go together.
Yes, thank you. So that leads into my next question. As we've all heard, in the past week, the GHSA made their decision to push back the football season, for the first game being on September 4th. Practices will remain the same in most counties, and they've already started practicing and conditioning. So what are y'all thoughts on this, considering that we're not going back to school?
I think it's kind of a tricky situation, like we've already talked about. There's all these factors that play into how we spread disease, and so to put students and all the people that have to be involved for a football practice at risk, even if it's outside, even if they're wearing a mask, even if they're allowed to have breaks, you know, it's so easy to have contact. And so it's not, when people think about contact, it's not just you and the one person that you may be around. It's you, and then you go home to all the people that you may actually be living with or be in contact with. And so that number exponentially grows in terms of risk. And you bring all that back every day. And so you think about all these people. And so when we start talking about how, you know, disease spreads, it's not just like primary contact. We also have to think about secondary and tertiary contact. And so for me, it's kind of a scary thing to think about, because, you know, we know that keeping people isolated or having that separated distance is really one of the major ways to keep the disease from spreading. So, to think about students being in such close proximity, practicing, it definitely gives me a lot of pause.
Thank you. Thank you. So President Trump has made a decision to bypass the CDC and have data come directly to DC. So Ms. Butler, can you speak on the impact of that?
I just want to say I don't speak for CDC as an agency, so I don't want that to be misconstrued in my role here. But in terms of just being able to understand how the data flows, rerouting the data outside of the current network would mean that we would lose our ability to understand how the pandemic is spreading on a kind of across the country, how states are tracking data, how hospitals or clinical settings are monitoring data. And so it limits the ability for contact tracing, it limits the ability to understand, how modalities are working, different effects. And so I think like Dr. Collier said, from a science perspective, it puts us at a disadvantage as a country. And from a political perspective, it's a completely different motive, I think. And so when politics and science come together, it can be kind of complicated to make decisions from a public perspective. And so definitely, I guess the easiest answer is to say it definitely puts a public health agency at a disadvantage if they don't have the data that they would need to make recommendations and decisions.
Okay, so what should a youth do if they come in contact with someone who's been having symptoms?
Okay, I'll be happy to respond to that. One, they need to socially isolate until they can get tested. And testing is readily available in a lot of places, but it's also difficult to get in other places. The hospital is probably not the best place to do it. So I would say check with your primary care provider first to see if they're offering testing. I do it in my office, but a lot of doctors don't. And then also the public health departments, they have testing facilities in place. They are very good at this. And not only that, but also contact tracing. So they want to know who you've been in contact with and monitor that to decrease the opportunity for it to spread. So again, socially isolate until you can get tested. The new CDC guidelines state that if you've been tested, amazingly enough, if you haven't been tested, but you've been exposed, you should isolate for 14 days. But if you've been tested and you're positive, you only have to isolate for 10 days. That kind of doesn't make scientific sense to me, but either way, get tested. The day one is the day that you're tested, and then 10 days out, which let's say that's a Friday, then you have 2 weekends, and you are basically in social isolation for 1 week. So the testing now, there are rapid tests that are available. There are the traditional and the gold standard for testing is the PCR nasal swab. And the problem is that the two largest laboratories in the United States, LabCorp and Quest, are backed up and taking extended periods of time to get those results. So oftentimes, doctors that utilize private labs can get your results in 48 hours, which is what I'm able to do.
And since you mentioned rapid testing, is that certain locations that do that, or do all locations do rapid testing?
No, the rapid testing technology, the first generations of it, half of them didn't work and didn't work well. They gave a lot of false positives and false negatives. The FDA has weeded out a lot of them. There's one that was approved last Thursday that I have in my office now. I'm testing it by doing the traditional testing at a lab and doing the rapid testing to see if the results are congruent. If they are, then I'm going to utilize that as well. But that is a blood test for antibodies only, okay, that I'm utilizing. There are rapid nasal swab testing that I don't have a lot of faith in, particularly those that have you perform the swab instead of a trained professional, because it's not painful, but it's unpleasant. And it's a strange feeling to have a swab that far up in your nose. So most people won't do it. And so they even had testing where they would have people take a swab and just rub it in the front of their nose. That was a total waste of time. And so I have zero faith in those, because the virus is in the posterior oropharynx. And so you really have to get deep in there to get a quality specimen. And the quality of the test and outcome is only as good as the quality of the specimen that's been obtained.
Can I add something, Miss Sydney?
Of course.
Just as a resource and for information, and Dr. Collier mentioned it, if you, regardless of whether you have insurance or not, if you're interested in testing, and back to your point, because we want people, if you're symptomatic, you definitely need to get tested. So we definitely want to know, we want people who are symptomatic, again, I'll just say it that way, to be tested. Anybody can always just access your public health. Just Google wherever you live in terms of your county. If you live in Fulton County, you can Google Fulton County testing. You can Google Cobb County testing. And on each of the public health's website, there's a coronavirus icon. You click on that icon and you go to testing, it'll tell you the various sites. But like Dr. Collier said, just be mindful when you look at those sites to see if it's a self-administering site versus one that are done by healthcare providers. But anybody can access information if you're looking for testing. They also, many of the counties will put even private testing on their testing sites that are available. And what I mean by private testing sites are, for instance, if your church is offering, a testing for a weekend drive-through or something like that. Most of the time, public health will include those testing sites as well. So I just wanted to mention about how if you're looking for testing and you don't have access to insurance, where you can get some of that information from.
And I'm sorry, can I chime in one more thing? So she was talking about sites. So on the coronavirus site for CDC, we also have a self-checker where it takes you through a litany of questions. So you answer, what symptoms you may be having, where you live, and then it will align you with some testing opportunities. And so it's kind of an interactive little thing that you can do, and you can put in what symptoms you have if you want to start there and you have questions about your symptoms so that you're clear on what you're exhibiting.
Thank you all for that. We will now enter the Q&A session. So please, if you have any questions, everyone, please put your questions into the Q&A box. The chat box will direct you to put your questions into the Q&A box.
We have our first question from the floor. What can parents tell their kids besides just no, who want to go out with their friends?
Okay, no works tremendously, because again, once you have made the decision to leave your home, you're at risk, and your risk increases depending upon the activity, whether it's indoors, outdoors, the number of people are there, and the guidelines that are in place for that particular facility. So when we're talking about kids going out, I'm presuming we're talking about kids that can drive and go out on their own. So we want to make sure that they have masks readily available. They need to keep masks in their car, in their purse, and have multiple masks available. So in case they arrive at a place and say, oh, I left my mask at home, that won't be an issue. Again, wash your hands upon entering, wash your hands anytime you touch anything, wash your hands upon departure, or use hand sanitizer. It's not a bad idea to carry your hand sanitizer, but again, soap and water is the best. Upon entering a restaurant now, first thing I do is go to the restroom, soap and water, wash my hands, come back, keep my mask on until I'm about to eat. As soon as I finish eating, I put my mask back on. I don't sit and just socialize and inside the restaurant. So again, guidelines to try. We are trying to get through this and still have some modicum of a life. But understand, all it takes is you can do it right more than half of the time. It's the 5 minutes that you do it wrong that you're putting yourself at risk.
Thank you. How effective is Lysol, Kleenex, Clorox, or Microban for cleaning?
I think all of them are pretty effective. I think the biggest issue that a lot of people have, and I'll let the other panelists also speak up, is how people use them. So a lot of times people don't follow disinfectants. Like there's an actual guidelines on the back of disinfectants. So I think culturally we tend to just spray things on and then wipe them right down. So the biggest thing when you're thinking about disinfection is making sure that you follow the contact time that is requested on it. So whether you're using a spray, Clorox, your dilution, whatever it is that you're using, making sure that you spray down the surface, leave it for the time that it says on there in terms of disinfectant. And then I always leave it a little wet and let it dry, let it air dry. Same thing with hand sanitizers. It's a contact time and exposure time is what makes the difference. So you could be using a really heavy Clorox, and then spray it down and then just wipe it 2 seconds later. That didn't have enough time to actually disinfect the surface. So I think the biggest thing is that, viruses aren't terribly difficult to disinfect because of the nature of a virus, but it doesn't mean that you don't need to follow contact time in terms of disinfectants, and just in being mindful of cleaning everything. And same thing with the masks. I see a lot of people, touching surfaces and then touching their masks. and then putting the mask back on. So being mindful that you want to make sure that when you're touching yourself to put a mask on, that your hands are clean, because you're also spreading germs that way as well. So thinking about not just disinfecting of surfaces, but everything that you're touching, from your car to your, if you have to go out, to your mask, to your, to yourself, being mindful of that.
And one thing I want to add is, especially for our youth, one of the things that you all know you touch the most are your cell phones and your electronics. So like Dr. Collier said, when you're going out and you're coming back in, you forget to disinfect that cell phone. So make sure things like that, it's not just our doorknobs and things like that, but things that you personally use the most, you need to make sure, as Ms. Butler said, that you're mindful about disinfecting and sanitizing those things.
Do we need to wear gloves when we are out in public?
I am not a proponent of glove wearing, because what I found is that gloves give you a false sense of security, and you can touch 1,000 different surfaces and you won't wash the gloves. So even if you don't get contaminated while you're using the gloves, you get contaminated when you're taking the gloves off. So it's more important to, if you feel like you touch something, to use the hand sanitizer or to wash your hands. And I think that they are really backing away from the use of gloves, unless you're in an environment like a hospital or something where there's a high contamination or a known contamination, and then you need to protect yourself. But under normal circumstances, my personal recommendation is not to use gloves. I stopped recommending them 2 months ago. And again, because they just found that under most circumstances, they're not going to be helpful.
I also want to chime in here that they also spread germs. So a lot of people wear them for all the services. So they wear them and they're getting their car and they go to store. And so you might actually be a worse perpetuator of germs because you're spreading those germs on your gloves. So definitely we would not advise, people to wear them, especially if they're going to multiple places and they're not in a healthcare or clinical setting.
What do you think about teenagers getting jobs during this pandemic?
Just me personally, having teens, or again, having 2 sons, and Dr. Collier may or may not agree with this. I think that again, life goes on in the midst of a pandemic, unfortunately. But those who can definitely, stay self-quarantined or stay safe in the house for as long as they can and work remotely and do things like that from a remote setting, we know is the best thing. If there are situations and circumstances, though, where teens have to take jobs or they have jobs outside the home, at least what I tell my family is just make sure that you are adhering to all of these guidances, though, that we're talking about. You have to go out, and make sure, though, whoever you even are employed by are employing these guidances and have all the measures that they need to take by recommendation, by CDC guidelines, et cetera, that they are taking seriously the recommendations. Do not allow them to put you in a position where they're not adhering to people having, for instance, to wear masks, or allowing you to wear your mask and allowing opportunities for you to wash your hands at appropriate times and for you to stay safe first and foremost. So I think if you work outside the home as a young adult, just make sure as a parent, as a young person, you're keeping yourself safe first and foremost, because I agree with Ms. Butler. It's not about just you staying safe. If you're not safe and you go home, then your family's not safe. You put everybody in your household at risk. So I would say just making sure that whomever you work for have those guidance, have the recommendations, and they're following suit to keep you safe and the public safe.
I would agree with that wholeheartedly, Ms. Meadows, because I found that young people that are out working and in an environment that's following the guidelines are much more sensitized to it and more sensitive when they're amongst their friends about, social distancing, mask wearing, etc. Whereas those that are staying home and just going out to socialize, particularly in my household, I have a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old. And it's just, every time they come home, I totally decontaminate them. Don't touch me. Don't hug me. Go take a shower, take your clothes off, etc. Whereas young people that I know on the, that I mentor or whatever that are working, I have to give kudos to places like Publix. Publix is doing a phenomenal job of everything from wiping down each and every cart to, as people enter, they give you hand wipes, etc. And some of the other grocery stores don't do that. And so I found that, again, working is very good because it keeps young people more on top of social distancing and all the other guidelines that are recommended.
Can you speak to our immune systems being weakened by staying quarantined too long? What have you heard about immunity? Is it too late for that?
It's not too late for it. Our immune systems are, normally our immune systems are challenged on a daily basis by exposure to bacteria, viruses, fungal, all kind of elements. And so our body is strong. It's just like going to the gym. You develop a certain level of physical fitness. And if you don't go to the gym, your level of physical fitness starts to deteriorate if you were in, quote, good shape. So if your immune system was functioning well and it's not being challenged as much or as often now because we're social isolating, it does increase our susceptibility to disease. I would state that unequivocally. But again, our systems are strong. Our bodies do a phenomenal job. In people that are otherwise healthy and have intact and functioning immune systems, I would just recommend that while you're socially distancing, etc., that you do everything that you can to boost your immune system. That's taking supplements such as zinc. Vitamin D is the #1 most recommended supplement by the CDC, the World Health Organization, etc. It just has to be taken at an appropriate dose of 5,000 international units per day, not 300 or 400. Other supplements that you may be aware of, like elderberry extract. Of course, amongst our culture, everybody loves black seed oil, and this has been shown to have some benefits for the immune system. So I would say liposomal vitamin C, at least 1,000 milligrams per day. So I would take supplements such as that in an attempt to boost my immune system. But the original question was, yes, it does decrease the functionality and strength of your immune system when you're not being exposed regularly to disease processes.
This question is for Ms. Meadows. Ms. Meadows, how many times can you use a disposable mask? Are there any particular brands of mask that you would recommend?
So first of all, thank you for that question. And disposable mask means exactly that, disposable. So disposable masks are not intended to be worn more than one time. So the face coverings or cloth masks like this one can be washed. The cotton mask can be washed, and they should be actually washed according to CDC standards. And Ms. Butler can certainly add to this. They're actually, the guidance, they should be washed every time you use them. So if you're using it for today and you haven't had the opportunity to come back home, just make sure when you come home, you wash them. And some people say, oh, well, that's a hassle. Here's a trick that I tell, again, my boys. Just take your mask every night. When you get ready to take your shower, get your little laundry detergent, wash your mask in the sink, hang it up on your shower, or hang it up on where you're gonna put your car keys or wherever you're gonna start the day. Put it where you're gonna, your things, your items that you're gonna start the day, so you can take your mask right out. But your cloth mask should be washed every single day. Disposable masks should not be worn more than one time. Disposable masks, again, are disposable. So dispose of them every time after each use. So for instance, going back to the example about Publix, if you work in Publix and, you know, again, those folks, they're wearing disposable masks. When they go to use the restroom or come back out and they need to wash their hands and do whatever, they're putting on a new disposable mask. So it's the same with disposable masks. Don't use them past the day. If you have disposable masks at home, certainly they can be used, but you're not supposed to use them more than once. And in terms of where you can buy them from, I mean, you can buy them now from, obviously, from anywhere from your local grocery stores to beauty supply stores to now even your clothing store. Obviously, if you're not leaving your house and you haven't had an opportunity to purchase masks, you don't have to leave your house to purchase them. There are several places online that you can order them from. There's some of the fashion now companies that are coming up with all kinds of sorts of masks. But the thing that you want to make sure that masks are is that they are breathable. They're cotton masks with several layers. Some masks have an opportunity where it has a little pocket, for instance, and that way you can put a filter in there. But again, you want to just make sure that it's a nice, good cotton mask as a face covering if you are not using the disposable mask.
Thank you. The fear of...
I'm sorry, I just wanted to chime in that just to echo what Lynn was saying, Ms. Meadows was saying, that you want to, if you have any questions about the mask that you have, there's tons of graphics and things on the CDC website that show you how to make them, how to disinfect them, how to clean them. I personally use a silicone mask that you can actually disinfect with disinfectants. You can wash it, you can put it in the microwave, and it has different filters that I replace daily. So every single time, if I have to go out, I replace the filter, I wash the mask as soon as I come in, and I have a couple of them. So you definitely want to be mindful of how you're using the mask. I do see people wearing N95s they may have gotten from other people that they know and keeping them and using them over and over. And we don't want to do that because then it limits the effectiveness of the mask. So just to be mindful of that.
All right. And you don't, like Dr. Collier said, you don't want to be nosy where you're having the mask, or as I call them, or you're ear hustling where the mask is right here instead of all the way on your face.
Thank you. The fear of contracting the coronavirus is giving me anxiety. How do I cope with these feelings?
That's a great question. And that's also, I think that would be great for our next session, the mental health section. So I'm going to hand that over to them. So thank you so much, Dr. Colliard, Ms. Catherine Butler, and Mrs. Lynn Meadows for addressing this very insightful topic. George Lester will now take us to the house with the mental health session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today. And I wanted to say good afternoon. Welcome to the mental health session. My name is George Lester. I'm a rising freshman at Morehouse College, and I will be serving as your moderator for this mental health session. During this time, we will be hearing from Dr. Melanie Hill on aspects of mental health that are both relevant to the present issues of our society today and imperative to our overall well-being. Before we begin the session, I would like to provide you with a brief introduction for our speaker. Dr. Hill has more than a decade of experience as a licensed psychologist for the state of Georgia. During her tenure, she has provided behavioral health services in various capacities, such as in college and university centers, as well as community-based mental health agencies. As a result of her extensive array of professional experiences, Dr. Hill has developed many areas of clinical specialization, namely in adolescent mental health. Her resume indicates not only her passion for her work, but also her dedication to actively helping young people. We are extremely lucky to have her level of expertise in our midst for this session. So don't be afraid to pick her mind at any moment when you feel you need to. So back to the question that segued into the mental health portion of our summit today. Dr. Hill, what are some ways that young adults and teens can cope with these unprecedented circumstances? And are there any common issues that you may see people experiencing during these unprecedented times in our world?
Thank you, George. First, before I start with that question, I thought I would just briefly start with an introduction of mental health. We hear that term, but sometimes we may not be fully aware or clearly understand what mental health is. So I thought I would just spend just a couple of minutes just kind of talking, just giving a general overview of mental health, and then certainly I'll be more than happy to answer that question. As it relates to mental health is really a state of someone's ability to function at a satisfactory level, to demonstrate both behavioral and emotional adjustment. And I also would add to that definition, it really is one's state of possessing the skills and tools necessary to optimize his or her potential. Now, for a few minutes, I would like to kind of talk about what possibly affects one's mental health, or what potentially interferes with a person's ability to meet his or her optimal potential, and what creates a mental health issue, and how do we discern between just mental health and maybe just your average or your daily stressors in life. So I would like to begin, like I said, with kind of an overview of some of the things that affect mental health. And I've divided those variables into three categories. You have your intrapsychic issues and that is defined as things that we struggle with internally, things that are within our mind, within ourselves. So we're going to talk about that. We also have environmental factors as well. So I definitely want to highlight what that means. And also the importance of genetics. And I want to start with genetics because I think sometimes we're not fully aware of the important role that genetic plays in mental health issues. And what I can say over the past 15, 16 years since I've been as a psychologist working with patients with mental health issues, genetics is a really, really important component. And so many of us may not necessarily talk to our family members and may not even be aware that past family members, maybe even family members within your own household, have dealt with mental health issues. But I think it's really important to have those discussions among your family members. Because what happens sometimes with genetics, it creates kind of a predisposition, a genetic predisposition to operate in a certain way. In particular, conditions such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, even depression and anxiety sometimes, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, oftentimes have a genetic component to it. So as a clinician, we're always gathering data and information about that person's family history and really wanting to understand perhaps, or has anyone in that family ever presented with any specific concerns. Now we have environmental factors that affect mental health. And I just want to highlight a few of those. You have exposure to adverse childhood experiences, or ACE. And what that is defined as is exposure to trauma. And trauma can be defined as in multiple ways. Trauma is defined as either direct or the witnessing of a threatening situation. And so when we talk about trauma, it can be within your household, whether you are experiencing or witnessing someone in your home being negatively treated, or domestic violence, things of that nature, or whether you are experiencing it directly, and whether that form of abuse comes in the form of emotional, sexual, or physical abuse. Also, an important adverse childhood experience is also neglect. And that's something that we sometimes don't talk about as much as well. Neglect meaning when a child's needs, not just their physical needs, because sometimes we think about neglect in terms of housing instability, homelessness, not having enough food insecurity, things of that nature. But there's also a component that's very, very detrimental with it, which is emotional neglect. And emotional neglect is defined as that child or adolescent's emotional needs not being responded to for multiple reasons. So when that person is experiencing, even from birth throughout, so you will see infants, you will see young children who seem to appear stressed, and part of that stress may be due in part to the lack of responsiveness to their emotional needs. I was in a class one time, and they said one of the most kind of traumatizing things that you can witness is a baby who doesn't cry. And what that baby has learned over time is that no matter how much I cry, my needs will not be met. And so they learn to adapt to that type of environment. So emotional neglect is something that I really want us to kind of not ignore and be very much aware of. Also, other environments, so I've talked about trauma, abuse, neglect, but there are also other environmental variables that affect mental health. Persistent tension. Maybe there's not necessarily abuse in the home, but there's kind of an environment of tension or stress where a child or adolescent feels a lot of times on edge because the environment feels very unpredictable, inconsistent. And so that level of persistent tension or stress also can affect one's mental health. And then sometimes in the midst of all that, when families are under stress or parents are under stress, or when the home environment is under stress, what will also be sometimes a result of that are unstable attachments that happen. And so again, that's another piece to this this puzzle of mental health. When a part of what buffers mental health is our ability to attach and connect with other people. And so when that, for whatever reason, when that does not happen, we may begin to experience mental health issues. And so we have environmental factors within the home, and then there can be environmental factors outside of the home, meaning that person's community, that person's neighborhood, the level of stress. Does that person feel safe in his or her community when she or he is walking to school, back and forth from school? Are they being stopped? Are they being bullied? Are they being tortured? Are they being, all those things also come into play, and can affect indeed someone's mental health. And so when you have those environmental variables, then what sometimes lends itself to what we call intrapsychic issues or intrapsychic conflict. And I want to highlight what those look like, because I want us to start thinking about mental health, not just in terms of, sometimes we think about, oh, it's a person that's walking down the street and talking to themselves. And of course that is a form of mental health, but there's a spectrum of mental health issues. And so I want us to be aware of them. So intrapsychic conflict, let me share what I'm talking about with that. Remember I said intrapsychic is our internal conflict with ourselves, how we think about ourselves, how we think about the world and others. So a lot of times people who tend to think in the following ways can sometimes have more of a propensity to deal with mental health issues. Their preoccupation with negativity. When you tend to focus in on the negative aspects of a situation, and you kind of filter out what's positive, but you tend to hone in on what's wrong, what's the negative aspects of a situation. That's an intrapsychic conflict or a cognitive distortion. When you have all or nothing thinking, when you operate from either I have to be perfect, or if I'm not perfect, I'm a failure. And when there's really no gray area. So when you operate in that way, again, you tend to that type of thinking can lend itself, not to say that you will suffer from mental health issues, but it can lend itself to mental health issues. Also, when you attribute negative circumstances or situations to yourself. So when something goes wrong, you take full responsibility for it. You ruminate over it. You tend to dwell on it. However, in contrast, when something positive happens, you maybe are dismissive towards it. You may minimize it. You may associate it with chance or luck, but you don't really attach it to yourself. So when you have that tendency to dwell or focus in on the negative aspects of something and tend to minimize or ignore the positive aspects of something, again, that way of thinking lends itself to mental health issues. The emotional reasoning, and I think this is really important for teens and young adults. A lot of times they operate under the notion, if I feel it, it must be true. And as a teen and as a young adult, our emotions are really, really intense. And our emotions oftentimes guide our decision making, particularly at that particular age, in that age range. And so I challenge those who, when they feel something, if they believe that it's true because they felt it, I challenge you to really stop and assess the situation for what it is. Ask other people, check it out with other people, to determine if your emotional response, if how you're thinking about it is indeed aligned with what's actually happening. And then the other part of another intrapsychic conflict is personalization. Taking things personally, taking everything personally. So when someone responds a certain way, or when someone changes their nonverbal behavior towards you, that you interpret as a personal attack against you. Those variables, when I say looking at your genetic predisposition, coupled with your environmental factors, and then the way in which you interpret or think about things, often are the ingredients sometimes for the mental health issues. So that's, again, I want to just kind of state that. Now to your question, George, about I think you were asking repeat the question. I'm sorry, George. Let me make sure I have it correct.
Okay, I was just asking, how do you believe young adults and teens can cope during this time when being faced with such unprecedented circumstances?
Yes.
And
okay.
In addition, are there any common issues that people may be experiencing during this time.
Okay. So yes. So when things that teens might be experiencing during this unprecedented situation, the first thing is likely perhaps some anxiety, because anxiety is grounded. The nature of anxiety is to worry or to feel on edge. And oftentimes that worry or feeling on edge is related to uncertainty. And so because we're in times right now where we are living really from day to day, in very, very uncertain, unpredictable times, without a doubt, even those of us who might have some emotional resilience likely are experiencing some anxiety during these times. And so I would challenge us. So what do you do with that anxiety? And then sometimes too, what do you do with that depression? Because ultimately, because our schedules have been interrupted, because our routines have been interrupted, because we're not able to socially engage in the way that usually brings teens and adults real joy and excitement, and children joy and excitement, because we're not able to do some of the things that we typically would do, you will see an uptick in depression among us. And so what do we do with that? Well, I say in times throughout life, when you're faced with uncertainty or lack of predictability, it is important to try to shift your focus to what you can control. And so what do I mean by that? Well, I was listening to the previous panelists when they were talking about different things of managing COVID-19. And one of the panelists spoke about use this time as an opportunity. So the first thing I would challenge us to do is, if you're thinking about this time that we're living in as a detriment, as a difficult time in your life, I challenge you to begin to think differently about it, and to begin to think about it as an opportunity. And what I mean by looking at it as an opportunity, looking at it as an opportunity to how do I need to operate differently? What can I learn about myself? What skill set can I learn during this time? Are there some different ways in which I can begin to connect with people that I haven't done in the past? And so while we're using social media in the way that we're doing, even today, having this summit via online, use Zoom to connect with friends. Set up Zoom outings. I've talked to different people. They say, well, hey, we do Taco Tuesdays. We do an art class on Wednesdays. We do different things. We've learned to use technology as indeed a way to connect, and be very intentional in it, and be very consistent with it. Because one of the things that we need in order to reduce anxiety is to have some predictability. So you try to work towards those things that you can predict as much as possible. So if you know that every Tuesday I'm getting on a Zoom call and my friends and I, we're going to have a dance off. If I know that that's happening every Tuesday, well, then that provides me with some consistency. That provides me with some type of routine. It allows me to have something to look forward to during that time. And also I say, look at it as well as an opportunity. Well, again, I said, focusing on things that you can control. Look at how you're thinking about it. When I wake up in the morning, am I thinking about, another day being home, another day being away from my friends? Or do I look at this, okay, another day for me to be better, another day for me to learn a new skill set, another day for me to connect with a friend differently, another day perhaps to spend a little time with my family that I wouldn't normally have done, another day to exercise or to go outside. It starts in my mind with kind of how you think about things, and then followed by a change in your behavior. It's going to be really important.
Thank you very much. When you were talking earlier, you said that there were a lot of factors that contribute to our mental health that we are predisposed to. So I was wondering if there are any ways that we can overcome these predispositions in order to be more mentally healthy.
Yes. So even if there is the possibility of a genetic predisposition, there are indeed things that we can do to try to mitigate the effect of the potential, and even with having a genetic predisposition does not necessarily mean that you will indeed have mental health issues, but it's just like any other condition. We just have to be mindful of it. But what I would challenge us to do are a few things. Again to one, talk to your family about your family history and understanding that. Number two, if you are experiencing any changes in your mood, in your energy level, in your enthusiasm for things, and I really tell teens to watch this. If you're finding yourself sleeping more, and I know now probably with the lack of schedule and things, you might be sleeping more just because you might not have as much to do. But I challenge teens to monitor this, and I challenge parents to monitor this. If your teen or child is sleeping, kind of consecutive hours throughout the day, during the day, that may be indicative of depression. Because a lot of times when people are depressed, they will sleep in order to try to avoid whatever's troubling them. And so sleep becomes indeed an avoidance tool that they use. So I say try to get, be intentional in trying to say, hey, we're going to get out. We're going to, and I know as a parent, I've had to work really hard to try to get my kids more engaged because they've gotten into this kind of a rut where they just kind of stay in their room. Like, no, let's go out, let's go outside and talk with people who have that same level of energy. Engage with people who tend to kind of motivate you. And those people in your life. And if you don't have them, I suggest that you try to find them. Those people who don't allow you to stay in that negative cycle of thought. Say, okay, nope, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to handle the situation, and we're going to move forward. So I say surround yourself with people who try to provide you with positive energy. Change your way of thinking about your circumstances and see it as an opportunity, not necessarily a challenge. As I challenge parents to be very attentive to the changes in their mood, their children's mood and energy level, and be intentional in trying to get them to stay engaged. I also, as parents, I think we need to monitor ourselves because this is affecting us just like it's affecting our children, for us to be aware of our energy level and mood and patterns of behavior as well. And look at things that make you laugh. If you're going to spend time on social media, I say use it to not just, look at the latest video, whatever, but look at it as an opportunity to say, hey, I want to learn something about someone. I want to learn about, if you're interested in a particular career path, this is your perfect opportunity to begin to kind of learn more about a career path for yourself and what that industry is doing. So, like I said, use this time to grow and change your way of thinking about it.
All right. Thank you very much. Something interesting that you had brought up was the idea of sleep being a subtle indication of depression. So I was wondering if there are any more subtle indications of a deteriorating mental state that we can be aware of that aren't so commonly known.
Sure. Thank you, George, for that. So yes, definitely changes in your sleep pattern. I would also say changes in what used to interest you. So let's say, for instance, if there was a particular television show, or I know a lot of times kids don't even watch television now, but maybe there's a favorite YouTube personality that you just really used to enjoy watching. And now you're just like, oh, I don't care about that. I'm not really interested in that. So you want to pay attention that, well, hey, why don't you enjoy that anymore? If you start to see someone maybe isolating themselves or not talking as much. So let's say if the kids are in a group chat and all of a sudden maybe one of the members is not participating as much in the discussions, or maybe they're sharing, but the content of what they're saying has become real negative in nature. Like they're just, making negative comments either about themselves or about other people. And so you kind of want to say, hey, is something going on? Something bothering you? Let's talk about it. Also changes in appearance. And I know we're home. A lot of us are home now. So I know even for myself, our appearance has changed, but there should be some times where you want to spruce up just a little bit, even if you're home, even if you're at home. So even if you're noticing that they just seem to never really want to maybe put on some fresh clothes or comb or style their hair, those are also other indicators that, hey, maybe something else is going on. And also, like I said, when their conversation just seems to kind of either become minimized, or when they are talking, it's more their thought process is more pessimistic in nature. Like, well, I guess nothing is really going to get any better, or they're just very negative in what they're saying. I think those are things to really be conscious of and to really monitor. And if they go on for a period of time, so it's different than saying this person is experiencing this maybe a day or two, but when this seems to persist over a week or 2 weeks or so, then like I said, you really want to be paying attention to that and perhaps try to support that person if necessary.
Thank you very much. And I'm being told that we have time for maybe one more question.
Okay.
So I really like to get your input on how we can try to destigmatize the idea of mental health and seeking help in that area, especially within the Black community, where it seems like that is a very common issue, where we try to shut off ourselves from that part of our health.
Sure. So I think one is having discussions like this and continuing to have dialogue about mental health and even in kind of, I guess, what we perceive as maybe kind of non-traditional settings. I'm glad that churches are starting to talk more about mental health, and that mental health is not in contradiction to your spiritual journey, your spiritual health, that it is, that you can still be a very spiritual person and still struggle with mental health issues. And so being able to have these type of discussions in this type of setting, I think is really helpful. But also I think, again, having among our family, I always think things tend to kind of start at home and it kind of spreads out from there. And so when you see commercials on television, because a lot of times you see commercials about mental health issues now, stop and pause it for a moment and have a discussion about, okay, hey guys, let's talk about what this commercial just said. Are any of you all experiencing this? Let's talk. I want us to have an open forum where we can discuss things like this. So making sure that you have an open forum within your household. And then among peers, I think schools do a pretty good job sometimes of talking about mental health, but I think probably a better job could be done. And I think it's important to talk about mental health in everyday terms, because when we, like I said, again, when I started off by saying a lot of times the reason why we are shy away from mental health, because we have a certain perception of it. We perceive it as, I am unable to care for myself. I am going to be walking that I am unable to do those things. And that's not the case. There are plenty of people right now who go to work every day, who go to school every day, who are depressed or anxious and dealing with mental health issues. And so you can be functionable in many parts of your life and still struggle with pervasive negative thinking or excessive worrying. And so it's important to kind of be able to talk about it in those terms and to say you are a healthy individual. You just may need some support around this part of your life, but it doesn't mean that you're this kind of crazy or outcast person. And even those who are with the most severe mental illness still have the capacity to function in many ways with given the right treatment. So just understanding that the importance of recognizing that you can indeed experience mental health issues and still live a very healthy life, I think it's important for people to understand.
Thank you very much. And we actually have one more time for a question. So what has influenced you to devote yourself to mental health work, especially when it relates to your work with young people?
Okay. Well, what I guess sparked my interest in psychology, and this would be a very, very short story, but was really my mother, who was a teacher of special education students many years ago. And so I would spend time with her students and all of that. And really just developed a passion for wanting to advocate for people who I felt could not advocate for themselves. And at the time, I didn't know this. I didn't know anything about psychology. And then I took my first course of psychology in high school. And I really kind of was drawn to it because I felt like I was kind of a natural talker and a person who listened to other people. Even as a child, I think people felt like they could trust me, and so that those skills of just being able to relate to people, to be able to hear people, to be able to understand them, but also hopefully to be able to give them some tools, has just been transferable in my journey as a psychologist. I think that's really at the core of what you do as a psychologist, is just being able to connect, to understand, to hear people without judgment, but also to be able to provide them with resources and information and things that they may not have known themselves. So that's kind of how I came about in the field of psychology. And what was the second part of your question, George?
I was just wondering what drew you to want to work with young people. So
okay, and I think particularly adolescents, a lot of times people shy away from working with adolescents, but I have found that's a very interesting stage of development. They're learning themselves, they're learning about their identity, and I think they're old enough to have some level of insight, but young enough to want to make change. And I think sometimes when you deal with older adults, we're kind of set in our ways a lot of times. So we're not really trying to make a whole lot of changes. But young people, I think if they know something and once they learn it, and if you present it to them in a way that's understandable and relatable, they will use it. And they will implement the necessary changes to improve their quality of life. So I think it's that kind of nice blend of being old enough to have some level of insight and can communicate with you, but young enough to still want to make changes and improve their quality of life.
Very nice. Thank you very much. That is all the time that we have for this session. Okay. So thank you very much for being here with us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Mosley.
Thank you, George. There has been so much information today. I hope that you all were able to take something away. And I truly hope that you guys are feeling encouraged and motivated to go and make a change, whether that's in your community through activism or just taking a different perspective in the upcoming days. So once again, thank you to all the panelists and for all of you for joining the Youth Influencer Summit. At the end, there will be a survey for you all to complete. So please take the time to tell us how you felt today went. And then after a quick commercial from the youth at Ben Hill, our youth pastor, Reverend Elizabeth Pollard, will close us out. So go ahead and play the video.
Please go vote. Your one vote could be the change to the narrative for not only your future, but our future generations as well.
Your vote counts. Don't forget to vote.
Guys, don't do anything this year. Be sure you go vote.
Hi guys, don't forget to go out and vote.
Be safe and go vote.
Your voice is your vote. Go vote.
Hello. Don't forget to vote.
Stay woke.
Be vocal.
Go vote.
Awesome. Thank you so much to everyone involved. Thank you to all of our moderators, our panelists, organizers, and everyone who had a part in this wonderful, awesome virtual voter rally and this Youth Influencer Summit. I pray that you enjoyed it as much as I did. I learned a lot of new things during this time. And I'm truly grateful for each and every one of you and for your commitment to the community. Now, to the young influencers, I want to say this: we need you. You aren't the leaders of tomorrow, you are the leaders of today. We need your brilliance, your boldness, your talent, your insight, and your energy. We need you to show up in the fullness of who you are unapologetically and to work with us towards liberation. We can't do this without you. We never have. I'm reminded that youth and children and college students were some of the greatest forces during the Civil Rights Movement, and that our very own beloved Congressman John Lewis began his activism at the age of 18. As we've seen today, you're never too young to turn the world upside down in the name of justice. So whatever makes you come alive, whatever gives you joy and benefits your community, do that thing. Your passions are valid and your voice is essential. Find your role in the movement and just do the work. Some of us are storytellers and artists, others are frontline protesters, some are healers and nurturers, and some are teachers. Whatever you feel God calling you to do, go forth knowing that God is for you and your community is behind you. I'm a proud millennial. But I have to give it to Gen Z because you all are absolutely incredible. I love you because there are so many of you that are so dedicated to liberation and freedom and justice that you will knock down anybody that stands in your way. I hope that you keep that same energy and that you remember that voting and educating yourself are tools to liberation that are invaluable. They are so important. So I do hope that you would stay woke, be vocal, and go vote. Now, receive this benediction. Loving and eternal God, we give you thanks for the blessing of this day and for the ways that your Holy Spirit has visited us. We thank you, God, that you are a God who blesses us with knowledge and information. And so we thank you for each panelist, each moderator, each person, God, who gave of themselves in order to educate us today. God, we thank you that you know us by name and you call us to take up our part in the kingdom of God and to promote justice. So God, we pray for courage. We pray for direction and guidance. We pray for inspiration, Lord God, and that you would give us the courage to do our part and do it well. God, we thank you for this time together. We thank you, God, that you are a God of justice and that you are for the righteous. And because of that, we know that we won't fail. It is in your Son, Jesus' name, that we do pray. Amen. Thank you all again for being here. We greatly appreciate it and hope you learned a lot. And do remember to complete the survey at the end.